My name's Michael, I'm 38, and I've always been the boring sibling. At least, that's what my younger sister, Alana, liked to tell people, usually with a smug laugh and a toss of her perfectly highlighted hair. She was always the golden child, the one who never did wrong, even when she wrecked Dad's car at 17 or failed out of her first college. Twice, I was the one who studied, worked double shifts, and quietly paid the mortgage when our parents hit a rough patch. But of course, none of that ever made it into the family group chat. What did was whatever Alana was doing. Her yoga certifications, her luxury crystal healing Etsy shop, and her plans to open a boutique that somehow never materialized. Still, I kept my distance. I figured if I worked hard, saved smart, and didn't rock the boat, I could build a life that didn't depend on family politics. That plan worked, until it didn't. See, 5 years ago I bought a beach house. Not a shack on stilts, but a real place. 2 stories, wraparound deck, panoramic views of the ocean, the kind of place you only ever see in vacation brochures. It was an investment, sure, but more than that, it was my dream. I'd always wanted a quiet retreat, something away from the chaos of work, the city, and yes, my family. The funny part? I paid cash. After years of working in finance, making smart investments, and living like a monk, I'd finally saved enough to buy the place outright. No loans, no mortgage. Just me, the keys, and the sound of waves in the background. It was mine. At least, that's what I thought. The first few months were bliss. I took solo trips on long weekends, invited close friends for barbecues, even let my co-workers use it once for a small retreat. Everyone respected the space, treated it with care. Everyone except my family. The first time I let Alana use it, it was supposed to be for a quiet weekend. She was going through a bad breakup, which in Alana speak meant her boyfriend finally realized she saw him more as a walking credit card than a partner. I gave her the key, stocked the fridge, even left a bottle of wine and a little note, just trying to be nice. She posted pictures on Instagram like it was hers, told her friends it was a gift from Dad. Through a party, someone spilled red wine on my custom white oak floors. I didn't say anything. I should have, but I didn't. I cleaned up the mess, paid for a pro to refinish the damaged section, and told myself not to overreact. Family, right? Over the next year, it happened again. And again. I'd go down to the house for what I thought would be a peaceful weekend and find used towels in the laundry, garbage that hadn't been taken out, half-empty bags of chips in the pantry. Once I found a stranger sleeping on my guest room couch. Alana's excuse? Oh, that's just Jesse. He's chill. Don't be weird about it. I tried setting boundaries. Changed the locks. Told her I needed more privacy. She'd cry to Mom. Mom would call me dramatic. Dad would say, just let her use it once in a while. Mike, she's your sister. Every time I said no, I was the villain. The final straw came one weekend in May. I'd taken Friday off work, booked a few days for myself, and arrived at the beach house with a stack of books and plans for absolutely nothing. When I pulled into the driveway, there were already 3 cars parked there. I walked in, confused, and there she was, Alana, in a bikini, drinking from a margarita glass with 2 of her friends sprawled out on my couch like they owned the place. Hey, she said, like I was the unexpected guest crashing her weekend. You should have told me you were coming. I could have made room. Made room. In my house. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat outside on the deck, listening to the waves and watching the moonlight stretch across the water. I felt like a guest in my own space. And I realized I was done. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not just any lawyer, but someone I knew would make this airtight. I told him everything. The title was in my name alone. The deed was clean. No liens, no disputes. I asked what it would take to sell it fast. He laid it all out. I gave him the go-ahead. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. I went back to work, lived my life. Quietly gathered my things on my next visit. Took photos of everything for the listing. Cleaned it up. Took down my art, my keepsakes, the little touches that made it feel like mine. Then came the moment. Last weekend, I invited everyone down for a family weekend. My treat. Cookout. Ocean breeze, the whole thing. Dad was thrilled. Mom brought way too much potato salad. Alana showed up in a white sundress like she was posing for a commercial. About an hour into the day, we were all standing on the back deck when she looked around and said it. Can't believe this'll be mine someday. Dad promised it to me when he retires. I blinked. What? She smirked. Yeah. He said you'd want to keep things in the family. Obviously, I'm the best person to keep it going. Mom chimed in without missing a beat. It's better in her name anyway. You're always so busy, Michael. I stared at them. For the first time in a long time, I didn't smile or nod or try to explain. I just turned to my lawyer, who had driven up with me under the guise of being a friend. I handed him the keys. List it first thing tomorrow. Alana's wine glass hit the deck with a sharp clink. You can't sell my house, she shouted. I looked her straight in the eye. Funny, that's exactly what I'm doing. She stormed inside, barefoot on the hardwood, heels in hand, like she was about to reclaim a throne someone had usurped. I heard cabinets slam and the unmistakable creak of the master bedroom door flying open. I glanced at my lawyer, who didn't flinch. He just took out his phone and started documenting the house layout for the listing. Total pro. Alana came back out, waving a photo in her hand like it was evidence in a courtroom. It was a picture of her and me from 10 years ago, one of the few framed shots I had left in the house, back when we still got along. She held it up like she was testifying. You said this was our house. You let me stay here. You let me decorate the guest room. Her voice cracked with faux disbelief, like she'd just discovered betrayal. I built memories here, Michael. I didn't even raise my voice. You broke in 3 times after I changed the locks. That was months ago, she snapped. And I only did that because you were being selfish. I could feel Mom inching toward the doorway behind her, like she wasn't sure whether to join in or pretend she didn't raise this monster. Dad stood frozen at the grill like if he didn't move, he wouldn't get pulled into it. It was always like that. Alana would erupt, and they'd all look to me to be the calm one, the rational one, the fixer. Not this time. I stepped past her and pointed toward the driveway. Go cool off. You're embarrassing yourself. That's when Mom decided to speak. Michael, come on. She's just upset. You don't have to sell the house just because of a little misunderstanding. Let her calm down, and we'll talk. I laughed. Not out of amusement, just pure disbelief. A misunderstanding? You two literally just said the house should be hers. That's not a misunderstanding. That's entitlement. Alana dropped the picture frame to the floor. It cracked on impact. This is what you do, isn't it? She said, pointing at me like she'd rehearsed the accusation in her head 100 times. You wait until people are happy and then rip it away. Just like you always did growing up. You think money makes you better than us. I stared at her for a second, long enough for her to look a little uncertain. No, I said. But it means I don't have to keep pretending this family deserves my generosity. Silence. That hit harder than any scream would have. For a full 30 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the ocean crashing in the distance and the occasional squawk of a gull overhead. Then Dad finally opened his mouth. Son, this isn't the way to handle things. You can't just what? I cut in, turning to him. Can't just reclaim my property from people who keep disrespecting me? Can't just make a decision without running it through the family guilt committee? Michael, Mom warned, like I was a child about to cause a scene in church. But the scene had already happened. I didn't make it. They did. I walked into the living room, picked up the pieces of the shattered frame, and placed them in a plastic bag I had packed for trash. I took my time, each motion deliberate, like I was cleaning more than just glass. I was cleaning out the last pieces of obligation I'd been dragging around for years. Alana followed me inside. You can't just sell it without telling us. What about the family vacation next month? I already invited people. I never agreed to that vacation, I said. You told everyone it was happening, then assumed I'd host it. Again. Because you always do, she snapped. That's what you're for. You're the responsible one. The one who pays for stuff. That was it. The quiet part. Said out loud. I looked at her. Really looked. This wasn't a sibling bond. This was a contract they thought I signed without reading the terms. I wasn't a brother. I was a utility. I'm not for anything, I said. Not anymore. By now, my lawyer was done. He walked over with a small nod. I've got everything I need. We'll file the listing in the morning. You'll get the paperwork to sign remotely by end of day. I'll send the staging team next week. Mom sat on the couch, eyes wide like she couldn't believe this wasn't just a bluff. You'd really do this? To your own family? I turned to her, and the words came out calm, steady. You all made it clear this wasn't mine anymore. So I'm selling it before I have to pretend I don't hear the whispers behind my back. Before I'm told again how it'll be hers once Dad retires. I'm done playing along. Alana scoffed. You're seriously unhinged. No, I said, stepping out the front door. Keys already in my pocket. I'm finally sane. I paused on the porch. The air was sharp with salt, and the breeze pulled at my shirt like it was nudging me forward. Alana called after me one last time. "You won't get away with this, Mike." I didn't even turn around. I just said, "Watch me." Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving behind more than just a house. And that's when my phone started buzzing in the cup holder. First Mom, then Dad, then Alana, then someone I didn't recognize. And one message preview that made me stop breathing for a second. "She's losing her mind." "What did you do?" I just smiled. Then I opened the message. It was from Alana's best friend, Camille. We'd never been close. She was always more like Alana's shadow than a friend. But over the years, Camille and I had exchanged the occasional polite conversation at family events or beach barbecues. She was the type who thrived on chaos as long as it didn't stain her own clothes. So for her to message me now, with that tone, "She's losing her mind. What did you do?" meant something had snapped. I waited a beat before replying. Just gave her what she asked for. A house she doesn't have to worry about anymore. No response. I set my phone face down in the passenger seat, eyes on the road. But my mind wasn't really on the drive anymore. It was on the last 10 years, maybe more. All the ways I'd let things slide. Let myself be used under the banner of being the good son. Quietly covering Dad's loan payments when his business dipped. Co-signing Mom's credit card after hers got declined at the pharmacy. Helping Alana move. And move again. And again. All of it stacked up, like I was some emotional pack mule. I didn't mind helping back then. I told myself it was love. That family meant sacrifice. But love doesn't come with expectations you'll always say yes. And sacrifice isn't sacrifice when it's demanded. As I pulled into my apartment's underground garage, my phone lit up again. This time it was a voicemail from Dad. I didn't listen to it. Just watched the transcription scroll across the screen. "Mike, let's not do anything rash here. It's not too late to work this out. Let's talk before you finalize anything." Delete. A second later, a text from Alana. "I'm done with you. Don't ever contact me again. You ruined everything." I took a deep breath and sat back in the seat, the engine still humming beneath me. Ruined everything. As if I had smashed something whole instead of just removing myself from the scaffolding holding up her fantasy life. I turned off the car. When I got upstairs, I showered, threw my clothes in the hamper, and sat on the couch with a blanket and a cold bottle of water. No TV. No music. Just silence. Not the heavy kind. The good kind. The kind that doesn't come with tension under the surface, waiting to explode. Around 10:30 that night, Camille messaged again. "She's telling everyone you scammed her. That she was promised the house, and you stole it out from under her. She posted a crying video on Instagram. Said you're trying to sell her inheritance." I almost laughed. Camille replied instantly. "Look, I'm not trying to take sides, but she's making a scene. Your mom's reposting it. People are leaving nasty comments. It's turning into a thing." Of course it was. Alana never did quiet. She couldn't scream into a pillow. She had to scream into a camera. Had to make sure people saw her heartbreak. Had to craft the narrative where she was the victim and I was the cold, corporate villain. I opened Instagram just to see how bad it was. There she was, Liv. Eyes red, nose running, though somehow still wearing a perfectly curated off-the-shoulder sweater. She sniffled into the phone like she'd just buried a puppy. "And I just feel so betrayed," she said, voice cracking in just the right spot. It's like he waited until I had real plans for the house. Until I finally felt like it was mine. And now he's just taking it. The comments were a flood of sympathy. "He sounds toxic. Cut him off. You deserve better, Queen. Family doesn't do that to each other." But one comment stuck out. A small one. Not aggressive, just curious. "Wait, wasn't it his name on the deed?" I watched it sit there. No replies. Just existing. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. How many people had I supported who would turn on me the second their gravy train ran dry? How many smiles had been fake? How many thank yous only said to keep me pliable? The next morning, I woke up to a dozen more messages. Camille again. 2 coworkers. Even my aunt, who rarely called unless she needed tech help. But it was the message from my cousin Drew that stopped me cold. "Dude, they're trying to freeze the sale. Your mom's saying the house was bought with family money. Dad says they're talking to a lawyer. Thought you should know." I stared at the message, reread it twice, and then felt a cold flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. They actually think they can take it from me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a house anymore. They weren't mad because they lost something. They were mad because I stopped giving. And I was just getting started. I sat with that message from Drew for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen, trying to freeze the sale. That phrase looped in my head like a bad song. It was absurd, almost laughable, but deep down, it didn't surprise me. Not anymore. The house was mine. Every cent of it had come from my own accounts, documented and taxed. There was no family money. Just family expectations and a long history of me silently filling in the gaps so they could keep pretending they were stable. They wanted to freeze the sale? Fine. Let them try. I forwarded Drew's message to my lawyer along with the title deed, purchase receipt, wire transfer confirmation, and even the tax statement showing I'd paid everything myself. 10 minutes later, he replied, "Let them bluff. They've got no legal claim, and if they actually try to take it to court, they're going to get humiliated. Want me to send a cease and desist to shut it down early?" I told him yes, and to include a clause that if they kept spreading lies online about me stealing anything, we'd pursue defamation. Meanwhile, Alana was still live streaming her heartbreak every few hours. I didn't even have to check Instagram anymore. People were sending me clips. Her voice was raw, dramatic, and just unhinged enough to draw attention, but not quite enough to be dismissed as theatrics. At least, not yet. She always said she'd take care of me. She sobbed in one video, curling into her couch like she was on a soap opera. After everything I sacrificed for this family, giving up my dreams, staying close to home, and this is how I'm treated? Like a parasite? I shook my head and turned the phone face down. Giving up her dreams? She dropped out of 3 different majors, ghosted 2 real estate jobs, and spent 6 months selling crystals on TikTok before asking mom for rent money. But perception was everything, and she knew how to spin it. She wanted the world to believe I had wronged her. And for a while, it worked. A few distant relatives texted me long paragraphs about not letting material things come between family. A second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 8 years said I should pray about forgiveness. One even had the nerve to say, "You don't need the money anyway." That was when it hit me. This wasn't about logic. It was about entitlement. About a group of people so used to me playing the role of quiet benefactor that when I finally took back control, they saw it as theft. I wasn't angry. I was insulted. By the following Monday, the house was officially on the market. My lawyer made it clear in legal terms that the property was solely owned by me, purchased with independent income, and there were no legitimate claims of joint ownership. We received a few mild threats of reconsideration from mom, then a panicked call from dad asking if we could talk like men. I let it go to voicemail. But the firestorm hit its peak the day after the listing went live. Alana called me. First time in weeks. She didn't scream. Didn't even raise her voice. She cried. "Mike, please," she said through broken sobs. "You don't understand what you're doing. I need this. This house, it's the only thing that ever felt like mine." There was a pause. I waited. Then came the real reason for the call. I already told people I'd be hosting the wedding there. And just like that, the crocodile tears evaporated. The act slipped. The whole thing, every post, every message, every accusation, was a PR stunt to keep me from selling the house before her big moment. I didn't even know she was engaged. And of course, it wasn't about the marriage. It was about the image. She wanted to post aerial shots of herself in a white dress on the deck of the family beach house with the ocean behind her like a movie set. I let her sit in silence. Then I asked one question. "Did you ever really think this was yours?" She didn't answer. Just hung up. 2 days later, the house sold. Full cash offer, over asking price. The buyers were a retired couple from Oregon who loved the view and didn't care about its history. They closed fast. No contingencies. The funds cleared in less than a week. I didn't throw a party. I didn't pop champagne. I just sat down, reviewed my bank statement, and felt the most profound silence I'd experienced in years. Then I started canceling things. First, I stopped covering mom's monthly grocery bill. Then I cut the automatic payments I'd set up for dad's life insurance premium, something I'd quietly handled since he got denied for better coverage years ago. I froze the card Alana had been using for emergencies. It was under my name. She'd used it for manicures and sushi. Then I sent one group email to the entire family. No drama. No rants. Just the facts. Effective immediately, I will no longer be financially supporting any of you. If I previously helped cover rent, groceries, insurance, or emergency expenses, those accounts have been closed or transferred. The beach house has been sold. Please do not contact me about money. I suggest reviewing your personal budgets. Best, Michael. That was it. The fallout was nuclear. Mom called first. "You're being cruel." I said, "No. I'm just finished." Dad texted. Can we at least talk about this? I replied, I tried for years. Nobody listened. Alana left a voicemail that started with, "You heartless," and I deleted it before she could finish. Then, silence. It lasted a full month. No calls. No texts. Not a single comment online. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd moved on. And then the letter came. Handwritten. From Alana. Inside was a single page. No apology. No acknowledgement of anything she'd done. Just one sentence. When Dad dies, the lake cabin better not be yours too. I laughed. Out loud. And then, for the first time in my life, I blocked my entire family. Every number. Every account. Every platform. I changed my email. I changed my locks. And then I booked a week-long trip to Iceland. Alone. No Wi-Fi. No phone service. Just quiet. Not the kind of quiet you suffer through. The kind you choose. And in that silence, standing at the edge of a glacier with nobody needing anything from me, I finally realized. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't cruel. I was free. When I was 18, I found out my college fund had been wiped out to pay for my sister's dream wedding in Santorini. But it wasn't the money that crushed me. It was the way my mom laughed when I confronted her about it. Like I just told her I wanted to be an astronaut or a rock star. "Oh, come on, Ethan," she chuckled, not even looking up from her tablet. "You're not exactly Harvard material. My name's Ethan. I'm 22 now, but I still remember every word of that conversation like it was tattooed behind my eyes. I grew up in a middle-class family, 2 parents, one older sister named Nicole, and a golden retriever named Bailey who honestly treated me better than most humans did. From the outside, we looked like your average suburban family, the kind you see on holiday cards, matching sweaters, polite smiles, a backyard with a swing set. But behind all that, there was a quiet hierarchy in our house. Nicole was the queen bee. I was the bench warmer no one remembered to pass the ball to. Nicole was everything my parents wanted in a child, charismatic, photogenic, ambitious in the way that made for good Facebook posts. Prom queen, student council president, early admission to a small liberal arts college with an absurd tuition bill. My parents used to beam when they talked about her. "She's going places," Dad would say, his eyes lighting up like he was talking about the next president. When it came to me, their tone changed. "Ethan's, well, he's a good kid." That was always the line. A good kid. The kind of phrase people use when they don't know what else to say. But I didn't resent Nicole at first. I figured maybe I just hadn't found my thing yet. I was decent in school, especially in math, and I spent my free time fixing up old electronics in the garage. I wasn't flashy, but I had plans, big ones. I'd been dreaming of going to Georgia Tech since I was 15. I spent 2 years researching programs, building my GPA, applying for scholarships. I'd even gotten accepted into a pre-college summer program that year and had a whole spreadsheet tracking deadlines, tuition costs, and dorm essentials. I was ready, or I thought I was. The thing is, my parents had always promised us both college savings. Not massive trust funds or anything, but they made it clear from the time we were kids. If we got into a good school, they'd help us get there. I didn't question it. Every birthday card from Grandma came with a $50 check marked for the college fund. My part-time jobs through high school, every paycheck I saved went into that same account. I believed in that account. It wasn't just money, it was my future. So when Nicole got engaged right after graduating college, yes, fresh out, no job yet, no real-world experience, and announced she wanted a destination wedding because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I didn't think much of it. Sure, it sounded expensive. Sure, Mom was suddenly spending hours scrolling through wedding Pinterest boards. But I figured they had savings. Or maybe Nicole's fiancé, Jason, had wealthy parents. He looked like the type, tall, polished, always wore loafers without socks. I didn't realize what had really happened until a week before my high school graduation. It was supposed to be a big day. I'd just gotten my acceptance letter from Georgia Tech and was floating on a cloud. I walked into the kitchen waving the envelope like a trophy. Dad was reading the paper. Mom was mixing something in a bowl. Nicole was on speakerphone with someone, probably her wedding planner. I said it out loud, beaming. I got in. Full acceptance. No one looked up. I remember clearing my throat and saying it again, a little louder. Nicole rolled her eyes. "Ethan, can you keep it down? I'm on a call about the welcome brunch in Mykonos." "Mykonos?" I blinked. "I thought your wedding was in Santorini?" She shrugged like it didn't matter. "We're doing both. It's all part of the experience. I laughed, awkward, confused. Wait, what? That sounds insane. Isn't that crazy expensive? Nicole smiled like a cat with cream. Oh, it's taken care of. That's when I turned to my mom, who finally stopped stirring the batter. Wait, what does that mean? You guys didn't use my college savings for this, right? Dad rustled the paper. Mom looked at me with that placating tone she used whenever she didn't want to explain herself. We had to move some things around, sweetheart, she said lightly. Nicole's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. I just stood there, frozen. You mean my college fund? You can always take out loans, Mom said, like she was talking about borrowing sugar from a neighbor. Plenty of kids do. But I've been saving for that since I was 13. Mom shrugged. And now you're helping your sister start her life. That's what family does. Then she laughed. That dry, dismissive laugh. Besides, you're not exactly Harvard material. I didn't say anything after that. I just walked out of the room, climbed the stairs, and sat in my room staring at the acceptance letter I'd once been so proud of. I don't remember how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. Bailey patted in at one point and put his head on my knee, like he knew. That night, I lay awake replaying every birthday, every job shift, every weekend I'd skipped hanging out with friends because I was saving for something that apparently didn't belong to me anymore. My parents didn't even act like it was a betrayal. They acted like it was obvious. Like Nicole's dream wedding mattered more than anything I'd ever wanted. I didn't go to my graduation dinner. Nicole texted me a selfie from a bridal boutique with 3 dress options and wrote, "Which one makes me look like a goddess?" I never responded. The worst part wasn't even the theft of it all. It was the casual cruelty. The way they dismissed me. Like I was just the spare. After that, everything changed. I stopped trusting them. I stopped believing in family-first nonsense. I stopped hoping for their approval. But I didn't give up. I took out the loans. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I sold my vintage game collection online. I worked 3 jobs through freshman year, tutoring math, fixing computers, even doing part-time delivery driving at night. I didn't tell them anything. They didn't ask. Nicole's wedding was a week before my first day of classes. I didn't go. Instead, I moved into my dorm with a single duffel bag and a secondhand laptop, and I promised myself something. I would never let them take anything from me again. But what I didn't expect, what blindsided me completely, was that 4 years later, after everything they'd done, they'd come back, not with an apology, but with a favor. That's when everything started to unravel. And that's when I realized they hadn't changed. They never would. And this time, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make them wish they'd never underestimated me. It had been almost 4 years since I last spoke to my parents beyond the occasional dry happy birthday text or stiff Christmas message. And honestly, life was better that way. Peaceful. Focused. I had my head down, building something real, one step at a time. No one to pull me off track with drama or guilt trips. I graduated debt-heavy but determined. I landed a decent tech support job straight out of college. Nothing fancy, but it gave me just enough breathing room to start freelancing on the side, fixing systems, doing back-end dev work, troubleshooting software for small businesses. Within a year, I had a modest client list, a refurbished home office, and my first taste of independence that felt truly earned. Not gifted, not inherited. Mine. Nicole, meanwhile, was all over social media. Jason and I made it to Florence, one post said, paired with an airbrushed photo of her sipping wine in a flowy sundress. Self-care week in Bali, said another. The captions never changed, either honeymooning, redecorating, or finding herself. What she never posted about, though, was a job, because she didn't have one. Not really. She tried a lifestyle blog, a YouTube channel, and even launched a short-lived boutique jewelry brand that folded after 6 months. Jason, from what I could tell, worked in consulting, which I'm convinced was code for my parents' pockets. I kept my distance, not out of spite, but because every time I peeked into their world, even just to scroll through Instagram, I felt that old, hollow weight creeping in again. That feeling of being the afterthought. Then one afternoon, while I was eating leftover pasta at my desk between client calls, my phone lit up. It was my mom. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I hadn't heard her voice in nearly 2 years. I let it ring out. A few minutes later, a text came through. Mom, Ethan, we need to talk. It's about Nicole. I didn't answer. The next morning, another text. Mom, please. Just a few minutes. It's important. Against my better judgment, I called her back. She picked up on the second ring, sounding oddly breathless, like she'd been pacing. "Oh, Ethan, thank you for calling. I know things have been distant, but we need your help." "No, hello. No, how have you been? Just we need your help." I sat back in my chair. "With what?" "It's Nicole," she said, her voice cracking with urgency. "She's getting a divorce." I blinked. "What?" "She and Jason, it's been rough. He's been seeing someone else. Some intern. He walked out a few weeks ago." I didn't say anything. "We didn't want to tell you until it was official," she went on. "But she's devastated. The house is in his name. The accounts are frozen. She has nothing. No income. No assets. She's in pieces, Ethan. Pieces." A pause. "And the lawyer fees, they're astronomical. You know how these things are." I still said nothing. She pushed on. "We were hoping, praying, really, that maybe you could help. Just for now. Alone. Nicole's your sister. She needs us." I let the silence stretch. Every nerve in my body was on edge, tight like a bowstring. I could feel something boiling under my skin, but I wasn't sure if it was rage or disbelief. "You want me," I said slowly, "to pay for Nicole's divorce." "Well, not all of it," she stammered. "But maybe just help cover the retainer. She needs representation. Jason has a team of lawyers." I had to laugh. I couldn't help it. A sharp, bitter sound. "Mom, for years ago you used my college savings so she could throw rose petals in the Aegean Sea. Now you want me to bail her out. That's not fair, Ethan." "No," I snapped. "You drained the one thing I had to build a future for her wedding. Then you told me to take out loans because I wasn't Harvard material. Now you're asking me to cover her legal bills." She hesitated. "People make mistakes. We didn't know things would turn out like this." "You didn't care how they'd turn out," I said. "You gambled with my future, and now that she's screwed up hers, you want me to fix it." Her voice hardened. "We're still your family. Are you?" That ended the call. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she'd go back to pretending I didn't exist, like she had for years. But I underestimated how desperate they were. 3 days later, Nicole showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, and there she was. Same glossy hair, same forced smile energy, but this time wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a purse that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't even say hi, just swept past me like she owned the place and made herself at home on the couch. "I know what Mom said, and I just want to be honest with you," she began. "This isn't just about me. This is about showing Jason that I have support, that I have people in my corner." I closed the door and leaned against it. "You didn't have people in your corner when you emptied my college account." She waved a manicured hand. "Oh, come on. That was years ago. Are you still holding on to that?" "Yes," I said plainly. She sighed. "Look, Ethan, I know we've had our differences, but this divorce is serious. I'm going to lose everything. The apartment, the car, even Bailey." I frowned. "Bailey?" "Our Bailey." She nodded. "Jason took him. Said he needed emotional support. Can you believe that?" I wanted to scream. Bailey had been my dog. I was the one who begged for him on my 10th birthday. But when I left for college, they decided he'd be Nicole's dog because she was around more. Now Jason had him. I clenched my jaw. "That sucks. But that doesn't mean I'm going to fund your legal team." Her voice sharpened. "So what? You're just going to watch your sister go down in flames?" "No. I'm going to watch you learn what it feels like to clean up your own mess." She stood up then, face flushed. "Wow. So all that talk about rising above, being the bigger person, that was just noise." I looked her in the eye. "No. That's why I'm not slamming the door in your face. That's also why I am going to ask you to leave." Her jaw dropped. "You're seriously kicking me out?" "I have a call in 5 minutes," I said, walking over to open the door. She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. Good, because I wasn't the same kid who used to patch her Wi-Fi or walk her dog while she went shopping. I wasn't the quiet little brother who stayed home while she flew to islands and posted selfies with hashtags like #blessed. I was someone she didn't control anymore. A week passed. Then the emails started. One from my dad, one from Mom, then a long one from Nicole titled, "An Open Letter to My Brother." Each one more manipulative than the last. Guilt, flattery, emotional blackmail. "Dad, it's time to be the man of the family, son. Nicole needs us. Mom, don't you want to be part of something bigger than grudges? Nicole, I guess some wounds just never heal. But I thought you were better than this." They even CC'd my aunt and uncle on one of them, trying to build a chorus of guilt. But the worst came 2 weeks later. I was getting coffee near my building when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I picked up, distracted. "Hello, Ethan. This is Amanda. I'm Nicole's lawyer." I froze. "Why are you calling me?" "I understand there's been some disagreement about financial assistance," she said smoothly. "Nicole listed you as a potential lender on her application, and we'd like to confirm whether you're contributing toward her retainer." "I'm sorry, what?" "She indicated you had agreed to help. We just need a verbal confirmation." My heart pounded in my ears. "That's a lie." "Oh," the woman said, clearly caught off guard. "Apologies. I'll update the record." I hung up. Then I stared at the screen. She hadn't just asked for help. She pretended I gave it. She was trying to manipulate the legal system, using my name to secure representation she couldn't afford. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't about college or weddings or dogs. It was about principle, about truth, about finally standing up for myself and drawing a line that couldn't be erased with fake tears or family guilt. I went home. I opened my laptop, and I started planning. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the call ended with Nicole's lawyer, I kept replaying it in my head. Her voice, cool, professional, utterly unaware of the wrecking ball she'd just swung through my already fragile ties to that family. What struck me the most was how calculated it was. This wasn't a last-minute plea or emotional cry for help. Nicole had planned to use my name. She had handed it over to her lawyer as leverage, like it was just another resource in her endless list of fallback options. I paced around my apartment until dawn, the same questions circling over and over in my head like a wasp trapped in a jar. How many times was I going to let them do this to me? It wasn't just about money. It never was. It was about being used, overlooked, taken for granted. My whole life, I'd been the one quietly picking up the slack, walking the dog when Nicole forgot, fixing the Wi-Fi at 2 a.m. when she had a Zoom interview, covering her coffee tab when she left her card at home. And every time, I told myself it was just a phase, that one day, they'd see me differently. But they never did. That week broke something in me, but not in the way they probably expected. I didn't spiral. I didn't rage. I didn't even send a reply. Instead, I shut everything down. I paused freelance work for the first time in 2 years. I canceled my meetings. I ignored the emails still trickling in from my family like smoke from a fire that hadn't quite gone out. I went dark. And for about 3 weeks, I did nothing but exist. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, let dishes pile up, skipped showers, and pulled the blinds down like I was hiding from a storm. Because emotionally, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to tell my friends why I looked like I hadn't slept in days or why I flinched when someone mentioned their parents. I had no one to talk to about it. Not really. My friends had good families. Or at least, ones that acted good. Ones that remembered birthdays and sent postcards and didn't use their college funds to pay for catered shrimp towers in the Greek islands. I hit my version of rock bottom one night at 2 a.m., sitting on the floor of my apartment, half drunk on cold coffee and eating dry cereal from the box. I'd just gotten an automated email reminder that my loan payment was due soon. The same loans I never should have had. The ones that existed because my own parents bet against my future. And right then, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not bitterness. Resolve. I looked around my dim, messy apartment and thought, I'm done. Not with life. With them. I was done giving them space in my head. Done letting their decisions define my self-worth. Done carrying the guilt of not being their ideal son. So I stood up. I cleaned the entire apartment from top to bottom that night. Scrubbed the sink. Vacuumed. Did laundry. Organized my files. When I finally collapsed into bed, it was almost sunrise, but for the first time in weeks, I slept. And when I woke up, I got to work. Not just work, but the work. The kind that changes your life when no one's watching. I started with the one thing I could control, my business. I reopened my freelance portal and redesigned my personal website. I rewrote every service description to sound sharper, bolder, more professional. I revamped my LinkedIn. I reached out to former clients with follow-ups, asking for testimonials and referrals. I created a PDF services deck and started pitching small startups I admired. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 new clients. Then 5. I began tracking everything: hours worked, profit margins, customer retention. I joined a few online forums and communities for freelance developers, started posting tips, sharing experiences, giving advice. People noticed. My inbox started getting inquiries without me even having to pitch. One of my posts on a developer subreddit went mildly viral. Something about structuring your freelancing rates for long-term sustainability. That post landed me a connection with a small business incubator in Atlanta, and before I knew it, I was handling back-end work for 5 early-stage startups, one of which was quietly gaining traction in the fintech space. The funny thing? The more I worked, the more I remembered why I'd fallen in love with tech in the first place. It wasn't just about money. It was about building, about creating something that worked because I made it work. Unlike my family, code made sense. Inputs led to outputs. Logic mattered. There were no passive-aggressive comments or shifting loyalties, just clean function and results. By month 3, I'd paid off one of my loans in full. By month 4, I'd saved enough to finally upgrade from the beat-up secondhand laptop that had gotten me through college. I bought a sleek new machine, fast, powerful mine. I kept my head down and built. No social media posts. No gloating. Just quiet momentum. I started journaling again, too. Nothing fancy. Just pen and paper each night before bed, tracking my progress, unloading my thoughts. One night, I wrote something that stuck with me. If they couldn't see my worth when I had nothing, they don't get to benefit from me now that I'm building everything. It became a mantra. I taped it above my desk. Months passed. I got healthier. Not just mentally, but physically. I stopped eating like a stressed-out raccoon and started meal prepping. Nothing fancy. Chicken, rice, broccoli, but consistent. I began jogging in the mornings. 10 minutes at first, then 20, then full runs along the river trail near my apartment. It helped, cleared my head, focused me. Around this time, I also reconnected with an old friend from college, Jared, who had started a small web dev company and was looking to bring someone in part-time. We grabbed coffee, talked shop, and clicked instantly. I took the role, and suddenly I had both a stable income and freelance clients on the side. Dual streams. More growth. Jared and I eventually partnered on a few projects that did well, one of which we ended up pitching to a local angel investor network. They didn't bite the first time, but one of the panelists remembered us. 3 months later, he reached out personally and asked if I'd be interested in helping with the back end on a new startup he was funding. And just like that, I was in. By the time I turned 23, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I'd built a full-time income, paid off most of my student debt, and launched a SaaS project with a modest but growing user base. I had my own LLC, a clean credit score, a small but respectable emergency fund. I wasn't rich. Not yet. But I was free. Free from the narrative they'd written for me. Free from the idea that I was second tier, less than, disposable. I'd built my own future. And that should have been the end of it. Should have been the happy ending. The look at me now glow up. The full circle moment. But life has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. Because just when I thought I was finally out of their orbit, Nicole came back. Again. But this time, she didn't come with tears or lawyers. This time, she came with receipts. And what she revealed, it changed everything. It started with a knock. Not a phone call. Not a text. An actual knock at my apartment door, 3 sharp raps just past 10 p.m. I was debugging a script when it happened, completely in the zone. So when the sound jolted me out of my focus, I instinctively glanced at my Nest feed first. The moment I saw the familiar outline, arms folded, head tilted slightly like she was already annoyed, I knew it was Nicole. For a second, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity won out. I opened the door. She looked tired, not in a long day kind of way, but in that stretched thin, makeup can't hide it way. Her hair was still sleek, but her eyes looked sunken, and the shine she always carried, the self-importance, the performative elegance, was dulled. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there with a manila folder clutched tightly in her hands, like she didn't trust herself to speak. "Ethan," she finally said, voice low, "I need to show you something." I didn't move. "Last time you showed me something, it involved lying to your lawyer and listing me as your financial sponsor." "I know," she said, looking down. "And I was wrong. That's not what this is." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch like she'd done 100 times before, but this time there was no air of entitlement. No smug smile. Just exhaustion. I'm not here to ask for money, she said, placing the folder on the coffee table. I'm here because I found out something about Mom and Dad. Something I think you deserve to know. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. She opened the folder and pulled out a series of papers. Some were bank statements. Others looked like notarized letters. At the top of the stack was a printout from our parents' joint account. One I recognized because I used to deposit birthday checks into it when I was a teenager. Nicole handed it to me. Do you remember the money Grandma left us? I froze. Our grandmother, Dad's mom, had passed away when I was 14. A stern, no-nonsense woman who never had much to say, but always sent birthday cards with crisp bills tucked inside. She wasn't warm, exactly, but she was consistent. Dependable. I remembered her funeral. I remembered Dad getting oddly emotional, not just from grief, but something heavier, something more complicated. She left us each a trust, Nicole continued. Separate ones. Yours was $50,000. Mine was $50,000. The terms were the same, locked until age 18, to be used for education or housing. I blinked. What? I didn't know until last week, she said. When I was going over some financial records with my divorce attorney, she found a weird transfer. From my trust account to Mom and Dad's joint savings. I started digging. I stared at the document in my hand. There it was, plain as day. A withdrawal from a custodial account titled in my name, transferred directly into an account held by our parents. The date? 3 weeks before Nicole's wedding. My stomach turned. They used your inheritance, she said, almost whispering. Not just your college fund. Your inheritance. They closed the trust early and liquidated it. That's not even legal, I muttered, flipping to the next page. They falsified an educational waiver, she said. Said it was going toward your college tuition. Then they rerouted it. The paper trail's shaky, but my lawyer said with enough digging, it's provable. I sat back, letting the weight of it all crash over me. They hadn't just made a bad decision. They'd committed fraud. Against their own son. Against me. Why are you showing me this? I finally asked. Why now? Nicole hesitated, then said something I never expected to hear from her. Because I owe you. And because I think I finally understand what they did to you. She looked ashamed. Not performatively. Genuinely. When Jason left, they didn't help, she said. Not really. They offered a guest room and some tough love. That's it. I begged for help with legal fees. Mom said, well, you chose that man. She gave a short, bitter laugh. The same people who moved heaven and earth for my wedding wouldn't spare a dime for my divorce. I thought I was the golden child, she continued. Turns out I was just the useful one. The one they could parade around. The one who looked good on paper. And when I wasn't useful anymore. She trailed off. I didn't say anything. Not out of spite, but because I needed to absorb this version of Nicole. This quieter, cracked version who finally saw the machine from the outside. I'd waited years for her to get it. For her to see me not as the bitter sibling with a chip on his shoulder, but as someone who'd been systematically sidelined. And now she did. I don't expect forgiveness, she said after a moment. But I figured if you wanted to do something about it, you deserve to have the tools. She stood up, left the folder on the table, and walked to the door. Just before she stepped out, she turned and said, they underestimated you, Ethan. I did too. But I think they're about to learn what a mistake that was. She left, and that's when it hit me. I'd spent so long building my life away from them, distancing myself, proving I didn't need them, that I'd never once considered turning around and facing them head on. Not with resentment. Not with yelling or Facebook posts or Thanksgiving speeches. With power. Real, undeniable, legal, financial power. And now, I had it. I spent the next 3 days diving into the folder, cross-referencing every document, highlighting key transfers, making copies and backups of backups. I uploaded everything to a secure drive and shared access with an attorney friend of mine, Monica, who had once helped me with a freelance contract dispute. She took one look at the trust records and said, oh yeah, this is a mess. You've got grounds. Civil? I asked. Absolutely. And if you want to go nuclear? There's a fraud angle too. But that gets ugly. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, I don't want to destroy them. I just want to take back what's mine. Monica nodded. Then we'll do it by the book. No surprises. Over the next few weeks, I built my case. Quietly. Strategically. Nicole provided more documents. Monica helped draft a formal demand letter. We uncovered other misuses of funds, small ones, maybe, but enough to show a pattern. There were even irregularities with Nicole's own trust, suggesting mom and dad had dipped into hers before she turned 18 as well. I began tracking my loan payments. Every cent I'd taken out because of their lie. Every interest fee I'd paid. Every month I'd spent working overtime to patch the hole they'd left. All of it, documented. And then, while scanning old email backups, I found something I'd long forgotten. An email from Dad, sent when I was 17. The subject was scholarship forms. In it, he told me not to apply for certain aid programs because it'll mess with the trust fund payout. We don't want to complicate things. I remembered being confused at the time. Now I knew why. They were never planning to use that money for me. They were buying time to reroute it. That email became the final piece of the puzzle. By month's end, we had a file thick enough to fill a legal briefcase. But I didn't go to court. Not yet. Instead, I waited. Because a better opportunity was coming. One they couldn't squirm out of. One where the spotlight would be on them. And where, for the first time, they'd be powerless to hide. You see, my parents had built their reputation in our community on being pillars of support. Dad sat on the board of a local business mentorship group. Mom was treasurer of the neighborhood association. They held fundraisers, threw garden parties, took pictures with plaques. And next month, they were being honored at a local gala for outstanding family contributions. The irony nearly knocked me off my chair. I RSVP'd anonymously. Then I started preparing for the main event. Not a scene, not a tantrum, just the truth, neatly packaged, legally backed, and strategically timed. They'd taught me everything I needed to know about appearances. Now I was going to show them what happened when the curtain fell. And this time, I wasn't backing down. The night of the gala arrived like a thunderstorm disguised in sunshine. It was one of those early summer evenings that started warm and easy, but held a charge beneath it, like something was waiting to break. I wore a navy blue blazer, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I knew how my parents would read it. Success, stability, professionalism. I wanted to look like the son they never thought I'd become. The one they pushed aside. The one they bet against. The event was hosted at a country club just outside the city. A sprawling, manicured place with white columns and a chandelier in the lobby that looked like it cost more than my apartment. I arrived early and took my seat at one of the rear tables, positioned perfectly to observe but remain unnoticed for now. The evening opened with a cocktail hour, full of fake laughter and too tight handshakes. I spotted my parents near the center of it all, dressed to the nines. Dad in a gray tailored suit, Mom in a crimson dress that shimmered under the lights. They looked every bit the respected community couple, smiling, toasting, posing for pictures with a backdrop that read, "Honoring those who give back." Nicole wasn't there. We'd agreed on that. She didn't want to be seen, not yet, but she'd helped me prepare every piece of what was coming. After an hour, the guests were ushered into the banquet hall. Round tables, polished silverware, white tablecloths, floral centerpieces. It was elegant, tasteful, and hollow. A few speakers took the stage. Some award for local entrepreneurs. Another for a charity initiative. Then came the main segment, the one labeled on the program as the Legacy Award, celebrating a lifetime of community dedication. That's when they introduced my parents. There was a short video montage, pictures of them over the years, volunteering, mentoring, smiling beside ribbon cuttings and award plaques. The narrator praised them for their financial generosity, for setting an example of family leadership and selflessness. I couldn't help but scoff. Then they walked on stage to a round of polite applause. Mom beamed. Dad gave his trademark modest wave. They looked like royalty. Untouchable. Until the envelope arrived. The MC handed Dad the mic and stepped back. My father cleared his throat and began with a joke. Something about being more comfortable in a workshop than on a stage. The crowd chuckled. And then, right on cue, one of the event staff walked up the stairs. She was young, maybe early 20s, dressed in black slacks and a white collared shirt. She held a cream-colored envelope with both hands and whispered something to the MC. I watched as confusion flickered across his face. Then a pause. Then he leaned into the mic and said, "Apologies for the interruption, folks. We've just received a document related to tonight's honorees. It appears to be from their son." A ripple of murmurs swept the room. My father's smile twitched. My mother blinked hard. I stood up from my table and made my way toward the stage. Slowly, calmly, people turned to look. Whispers followed me like a shadow. The MC hesitated, unsure what to do, but I gave him a nod as I stepped beside him. "May I?" He handed me the mic. I turned to face the crowd, and for a moment, I saw them, not just my parents, but the entire room. Donors, executives, neighbors, friends, all people who'd been fed the same narrative for years. The benevolent couple, the generous parents, the pillars of the community. I took a breath. "My name is Ethan," I said. "Some of you know me. Most of you probably don't. I'm the son of tonight's honorees." I looked at my parents. Mom's lips were tight. Dad's jaw was clenched. "And I'm here because I believe the truth matters." I held up the envelope, then carefully pulled out a set of documents and passed copies to the MC. Inside these pages, you'll find proof that the people being celebrated tonight used their son's college fund and inheritance, not to support his education, but to fund a wedding in Santorini and a luxury vacation package. A wave of gasps swept the room. "They falsified documents," I continued, voice steady. "Claimed the money was being used for tuition so they could withdraw it early, then rerouted it into a personal account and spent it. When I confronted them, I was told I wasn't Harvard material and to take out loans instead." More murmurs. Chairs shifting. I did take out those loans. I worked 3 jobs to survive college. I built my career from scratch while they continued posting beach photos with hashtags like #blessed. I paused. They did this while being praised for their generosity, while holding up a public image that doesn't match the private damage they've caused. I turned back to the crowd. "And I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for honesty. Because I think if we're going to honor people for being selfless and moral, we should know who they really are." I handed the mic back to the stunned MC, turned, and walked off the stage. Behind me, the silence cracked into a storm. People were whispering, pointing, exchanging glances. My parents remained frozen in place. I didn't stick around. I walked straight out of the banquet hall and into the warm night air, where Nicole was waiting in a car parked across the street. She rolled down the window and gave me a look. "You did it." I nodded. "They can't spin it now. Not with those documents." She looked down. "They're going to hate us." "Probably," I said. "But they already chose their version of us a long time ago." She unlocked the door. "Want a ride?" I slid into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead. 2 days later, news of the gala incident made the local business journal. Not front page, but big enough. The community board released a polite statement about reassessing the criteria for honorees. Dad was quietly removed from the mentorship group. Mom stepped down as treasurer to focus on personal matters. The fallout was clean. No police, no lawsuits, but their names? Tarnished. Their reputation? Shaken. Their ability to pretend? Gone. They tried to call me once after that. Just once. I didn't answer. They left a voicemail that started with, "Ethan, we need to talk," and ended with, "This is a misunderstanding," but I deleted it before it finished. Nicole kept her distance too. She moved to a new apartment, got a job working part-time for a nonprofit, and started seeing a therapist. We weren't best friends overnight, but the air between us was different now. Lighter. More honest. I never got the money back, but I got something better. I got closure, and I got to look in the mirror every morning knowing I didn't just survive them. I outgrew them. In the end, the boy they wrote off as not Harvard material became the man who rewrote their legacy. And I did it without their permission. They tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was the foundation. I've always been the kind of guy who keeps his head down. I do the work, I stay out of family drama, and I never show up anywhere expecting applause. I'm Miles. I'm 34. Grew up in Northern Virginia, now living in DC, and if you ask my family, I'm the quiet one. The dependable one. The one who'll answer a 3 a.m. call, loan you money without a second thought, and help move your couch 3 times because you didn't like the first apartment's lighting. I never minded being that guy, the background player in everyone else's story. But there's a funny thing about always being underestimated. Eventually, people forget to watch their mouths around you. My younger brother, Connor, just bought a condo with the help of our parents. And when I say help, I mean they basically handed him a down payment on a silver platter after he got a job that lasted, I kid you not, 3 months. My mom called it an investment in his future. Funny, when I started my business out of a basement, they called it a risky phase. That risky phase now has 12 employees, government contracts, and 3 letters after its name. But I never bring that up. It's just not who I am. Anyway, Connor's housewarming party was last Saturday. It was one of those awkward, obligatory family things where everyone brings wine, pretends to like the hummus, and comments on the crown molding. I showed up a little late. Not intentionally. Traffic just sucked. And the moment I walked in, Connor's new girlfriend, Avery, gave me a once-over like she was scanning a barcode on clearance clothing. She was all smiles and fake cheek kisses, but you could see it in her eyes, the judgment. The kind that's sugar-coated in every word, but sharp enough to cut you clean if you're not careful. "Oh, you made it," she said, tone syrupy sweet. "We were starting to wonder if you were crashing here now that Connor's got a place." She laughed, not like it was a joke, but like it was an inside joke she assumed everyone else was already in on. Connor chuckled. My mom did her signature tight-lipped smirk. My dad, always the diplomat, gave a nervous laugh and muttered, "Let it go. Avery, you're making this awkward." She didn't let it go. That was just her warm-up. The thing about Avery is that she's that brand of snobby that comes from trying too hard to appear effortless. She kept touching her hair, name-dropping places in New York she used to go when she was in the city, and constantly circling back to how humble beginnings are so important. It was the kind of talk that only sounds kind on the surface. Underneath it, she was digging. "I just think it's so inspiring that Connor's working his way up, and that you guys are so close. Some people get weird when their siblings do better than them, you know," she said later, over brie and crackers. "But not you, Miles. You're just so chill about everything." I nodded, smiled, and changed the subject. I always change the subject. It's a habit now, like muscle memory. But she wasn't done. At one point, while we were all gathered around the kitchen island, Avery leaned in and said, "So what do you do again? Something in IT, right?" She said it like I worked behind a register fixing iPhones. I was about to answer when Connor cut in with, "Miles has some tech company thing. He's been doing it forever. Right?" Avery said, waving a hand. "Startups are so cool. I did a couple projects for a startup through our firm. You know Cornerstone Solutions? We manage a bunch of contracts for local businesses. It's wild how many of them just don't know what they're doing." I blinked. "Cornerstone?" I asked, careful not to sound too interested. She smiled like she'd just been complimented. "Yeah, I'm an account strategist. I basically handle the brand partnerships. A lot of small fish, no offense, but it pays." I felt my jaw tick just slightly. It wasn't what she said, it was the smugness underneath. The subtle jab. The assumption that I was, by default, the small fish. It was the first time I realized she didn't just think I was beneath her. She had no clue I was the ocean she was swimming in. See, one of the contracts my company holds is with a mid-sized marketing agency. We handle their data infrastructure, their back-end automation, and, as of 6 months ago, we were tapped to renew a 3-year extension through a government tech subsidy pilot. That agency? Cornerstone Solutions. We manage 90% of their operating platforms. My signature's on every compliance report they submit. But I said nothing. Not yet. I watched her brag to my aunt about how exhausting it was to deal with clients who couldn't afford proper CRM systems. I watched my dad nod and smile and sip his beer, like it was just easier to let her monologue run its course than interrupt. And I watched Connor puff up his chest every time she tossed him a compliment, as if her arrogance somehow validated his worth. It wasn't just that they were rude. It was that they didn't even realize it. Like I was invisible. Like I didn't matter. And maybe that's what stung most. Not the insult. Not even the lies. But the way my own family looked past me. The way my dad, especially, just let her keep going. He'd always said he wanted peace. But sometimes peace just means letting someone else get bruised so no one else has to raise their voice. I stood there, holding my drink, letting it all wash over me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But there was a flicker, the quiet spark that comes before the fire. And as Avery pulled out her phone to show someone her LinkedIn profile, bragging about a campaign I knew we'd actually rescued from collapse, I quietly reached for mine. I hadn't planned on checking it. But something told me I should. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was instinct. I opened the internal contract dashboard from my company portal, typed in Cornerstone, and scrolled down to the subcontracting employees under the analytics wing. Her name popped up halfway down the list. Avery Collins. Account strategist. Non-renewal pending. Reviewed by Miles J. Taylor, me. I stared at it for a moment, not saying a word. And then I smiled. Not smug, not malicious. Just calm. Because in that moment, I realized something. She had no idea who I was, and neither did the rest of them. I put the phone away, looked up, and watched as Avery laughed at her own joke again. Something about how some people are just built for roommates. My dad gave a low chuckle and shook his head, and that was the moment I knew. I wasn't going to stay silent much longer. I didn't say anything that night. I just left the party a little early, offered a polite goodbye, and slipped out while everyone was still laughing at one of Connor's exaggerated stories. On the drive home, I didn't turn on music. I just sat with the silence. I wasn't even angry, not really. It was more like tired. Tired in that way where your body isn't sore, but something in your chest feels heavy, like someone's been quietly stacking bricks there for years. It wasn't just Avery. She was a symptom. The bigger thing, the real thing, was my family. For years, they treated me like background noise. Like wallpaper. Useful when they needed something. Invisible when they didn't. When Connor failed out of college, who helped pay off his private loans under the table to protect his credit? Me. When mom's car broke down and dad was out of town, who drove 4 hours with a borrowed trailer and got it towed for free? Me. When our Aunt Denise was in the hospital and nobody else could get off work, who sat with her 3 nights in a row and brought her crosswords and ginger tea? You get the picture. And not once did they say thank you. Not once did they ask if I needed anything. I think, in their eyes, I was already the responsible one. The one who had it all figured out. So why bother? But what they didn't realize, or maybe didn't want to realize, was that the reason I was doing okay was because I'd had to figure it out. Alone. No safety net. No bailout. While Connor coasted on every excuse in the book, I was building a business out of my garage, eating canned soup, and learning code at 2 a.m. because I couldn't afford to hire help. The Monday after the party, I got an email from HR at Cornerstone requesting a formal performance review signature for Avery's contract. It had been flagged for review because she'd missed 2 campaign deadlines, and there were client-side complaints about communication delays. The irony was so rich I almost laughed. I didn't sign it right away. I bookmarked it. Sat with it. Then Tuesday, I got a text from my mom. Connor's got a big interview Friday. Can you help him prep? He said you're good at that kind of thing. Maybe help him tweak his resume? Proud of you too. I stared at it. No hello. No how are you? Just a request wrapped in a compliment like a spoonful of sugar to make the guilt go down easier. I didn't respond. Wednesday night, Connor called me. I picked up. Yo, Miles, you busy? Not really. So, I've got this Zoom interview coming up. It's for this SaaS sales thing, and I think it'd be dope if you could help me sound like. I don't know, more legit? I raised an eyebrow. You want me to lie for you? Not lie, just, fluff it up. I mean, you know how this stuff works. You talk circles around these tech people all the time. I paused. Connor, do you even want the job? Dude, come on. It's good money. Dad said if I lock this down, they'll help with the Tesla. I almost dropped my phone. Wait, they're buying you a Tesla? No, not buying, just helping with the down payment. Like an early birthday thing. I went silent. Hello, he asked. Yeah, I said. I'm here. Cool. So can you hop on Zoom with me tomorrow? Just run through some fake client objections and show me how to close. I said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see just how far this would go. Thursday came and went. We did the Zoom. I gave him tips. Watched him write them down like a kid copying homework. He kept asking things like, how do I make it sound like I understand KPIs? And should I say I'm good with CRMs even if I don't know what that means? That night, I got another text from my mom. So proud of Connor lately. He's really finding his stride. Reminds me of your Uncle Pete when he was young. Real go-getter. You boys are finally both doing great. Family's proud. I didn't reply. Friday, I logged into the client portal and checked the status of the Cornerstone contract. Avery's file had a note from their project manager. Apparently she'd mishandled a cross-channel campaign, and the agency had to comp the client with a $5,000 credit to keep them happy. She hadn't mentioned that at the party. I still didn't touch the file. Not yet. The final straw came Saturday. I stopped by my parents' place for lunch. They'd invited me, and after dodging texts all week, I figured I'd face it head on. The second I walked in, I could smell something baking. Probably that dry lemon cake mom made when she wanted to show off. Connor was already there, lounging on the couch, sipping from a bottle of kombucha like it was champagne. Avery was there too. I froze for a second in the hallway. She looked up and grinned. Look who finally showed up, she said. Guess you can afford gas money. My dad chuckled from the kitchen. Avery, come on. She leaned in like it was a secret. I'm kidding. You know I'm joking, right, Miles? I'm not trying to start a class war or anything. I said nothing. Just smiled. Sat down across from her. She launched into another story about some influencer client she was hand-holding through a rebrand, clearly performing for the room. Connor nodded along like a proud boyfriend. My mom placed a plate of that dry cake in front of me like it was peace offering. And then, it happened. Avery reached into her bag, pulled out her laptop, and said, Actually, Miles, this is hilarious, but I think one of your campaigns came across my desk this week. Some tiny firm called MJT Systems. Connor laughed. Yo, that's you, right? I stared at her. That's mine, yeah. She blinked. Wait, seriously? You work there? I own it. She froze for a beat. Oh, huh. I guess I didn't connect the dots. Don't worry, I said casually. Most people don't. Connor leaned forward. Wait, but like, you own it. Yeah. Started it 10 years ago. Avery tried to recover. That's cool. So you're like, what CEO? Something like that. Mom clapped her hands, beaming. See? That's why I said we're proud of both our boys. Everyone's doing great. Avery narrowed her eyes. Well, small world. We've actually been reviewing some of your systems. There's been some redundancy on the back end. Just so you know. I raised an eyebrow. Redundancy? Yeah, she said, flipping her laptop open. Your cloud stack. It's not optimized for cross-platform CRM integration. Just saying. We flagged it. Connor let out a low whistle. Dumb. You gonna let her come for your company like that? I smiled. And then I reached into my own bag, pulled out my phone, and tapped the dashboard app. Turned the screen toward Avery. Her name. Her department. Her pending termination notice. She stared at it like it was a ghost. I didn't say a word. And that silence, that awful, ringing silence, was the moment everything changed. The look on Avery's face said everything. Her lips parted slightly, the smug confidence drained from her expression like someone had pulled a plug. She stared at the phone in my hand for a beat too long, and then, in true performative fashion, gave a sharp, awkward laugh, as if she was the one in on the joke. That's hilarious, she said. Where do you even get that? I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. Connor leaned over the screen. Wait, hold up. Is that real? Like really real? Still, I said nothing. I just sat back in the chair and took a slow sip of the room temperature lemon water my mom had given me. Let it burn a little on the way down. Avery quickly shut her laptop and tucked it into her bag, suddenly very interested in checking something on her phone. My dad, meanwhile, cleared his throat like he was about to say something, then chose not to. And my mom, ever the peacemaker, nervously started talking about the casserole she planned to make next weekend. Like that would erase the tension humming in the air. I finished my slice of dry cake and left not long after, saying I had work to do, which was true, but not in the way they assumed. The ride home felt different this time. Not quiet, clean, like I'd finally taken a deep breath after years of shallow ones. But beneath that, there was something else too. A hollowness I hadn't expected, like I'd finally hit back after years of swallowing my pride. But the satisfaction didn't sit the way I thought it would. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. I kept replaying the look on my dad's face. Not surprised, not defensive, just disappointed, not in her, but in me. And that's what cracked something open in me. Because somewhere deep down, some part of me was still that kid looking for approval. Still waiting for the nod, the pat on the back, the we see you. And instead, all I'd ever gotten was the same old silence. Or worse, thinly veiled disappointment masked as neutrality. In their eyes, I'd embarrassed Avery. Made things uncomfortable, rocked the boat. But what about me? What about all the times I sat there and let the boat rock me? I thought about calling my dad, explaining myself, but I didn't. I knew how that conversation would go. You could have handled that better, Miles. It's not worth making drama over. You know how she is. Just let it go. Let it go. Always, always that. The next morning, I opened up my company dashboard again, stared at Avery's file, and after a few long minutes, clicked Defer Review. Not because she deserved it, she didn't, but because I didn't want to be the villain in a story they'd already written me into. I didn't need to burn her. Not yet. I just needed space. But space was hard to come by. The fallout came fast. That Monday, I got a call from my mom. No greeting, just a tight voice. I just talked to Connor. He said you embarrassed Avery. I stayed quiet. Was that necessary? Honestly, Miles, I know you two didn't get off on the right foot, but this isn't like you. I asked, what is like me? Silence. Then, you know what I mean. No, I didn't. Not anymore. She's very upset. Connor's upset. We just want peace. Peace. There it was again. That cursed word. I've been peaceful my whole life, I said. Where did that get me? She didn't answer. Just sighed. Then told me she hoped I'd apologize soon so this didn't turn into a thing. I hung up after that. I didn't yell. Didn't argue. I just put the phone down and stared at the wall of my home office. Suddenly, it felt colder than it ever had. That week, I buried myself in work. We had 2 major projects nearing deadline, 1 grant pitch to finalize, and a staffing restructure I'd been putting off for months. I should have felt productive, but I didn't. I felt numb. Every message from my mom was clipped. Every call from Connor went unanswered. I skipped a Sunday dinner for the first time in years and didn't even text to say why. And not once, did any of them reach out just to ask how I was doing. It was all about Avery. Her feelings. Her embarrassment. Her misunderstood sense of humor. Meanwhile, I was sinking. I didn't realize how badly I needed my family to just see me until it became clear they never really had. And now that the illusion had shattered, I didn't know what to do with the pieces. One night, about a week after the party, I got a text from an old friend, Kayla. We hadn't spoken in months. She used to work with me back when I had 2 employees and we worked out of a converted basement in Alexandria. Hey stranger. Heard through the grapevine, you're still saving the tech world one over-engineered platform at a time. Coffee sometime. I hesitated, then typed back. Only if you're paying. We met up 2 days later. She looked exactly the same. Denim jacket, sarcastic smile, eyes that missed nothing. We caught up over burnt espresso and stale croissants in a half-empty cafe. At some point, she leaned forward and said, "So, what's up with you lately? You look like someone who just realized their dog has been secretly judging them." I laughed, actually laughed, and told her everything. Not the polished version. Not the business owner filter. Just me. The ignored older brother. The disappointment. The "you're doing fine, so shut up, guy." She listened. Didn't interrupt. Just nodded every now and then. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "Okay, so you've got a crappy family and a therapist's dream of a brother. Join the club. You want a sticker?" I blinked. "Excuse me. You heard me. Look, I'm not saying they're not jerks. They are. But you? You've spent so long being useful that you don't even know what it feels like to just be. You're allowed to be angry, Miles. You're allowed to stop carrying everybody." I didn't know what to say. "You need a reset," she said, standing. "Let me show you something." She took me to this tiny co-working loft she'd been renting out on weekends. All exposed brick, white boards, and secondhand furniture. It was empty, quiet, and oddly comforting. "You ever thought about building something that isn't just for someone else?" she asked. "Something that's just yours? Not for a client. Not for a contract. Just for fun." Fun. What a strange word. That night, I went home and opened an old sketchpad I hadn't touched in years. Back when I first started coding, I'd draw layouts and scribble down wild ideas for apps that didn't make sense to anyone but me. I flipped through pages of half-formed ideas, bad logos, and margin notes like, would anyone even use this? And one stuck out. A platform idea I'd had for mentorship. Real-time, anonymous peer coaching for people in high-pressure jobs, filtered by industry, role, and problem. I'd shelved it years ago, told myself it was too niche. But now it felt like maybe I needed it more than anyone. Over the next few weeks, I quietly started working on it again. Nights, weekends, a little every day. No pressure, no deadlines, just something mine. Kayla helped test it, gave feedback, roasted my UI, encouraged me. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my parents, not Connor, definitely not Avery. And with every passing day, I felt a little lighter, a little more me. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was looking for peace, real peace. And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe I might actually find it. But of course, peace never lasts long when your family is determined to drag you back in. And what happened next? Well, let's just say, the moment I started to rebuild, they found a new way to knock it all down. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence from my family. No calls, no messages, no passive-aggressive group chats. Not even a funny meme from my mom. And trust me, she's the type to send minions saying, Wine o'clock at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't sure if they were freezing me out or just waiting for me to apologize. Either way, I didn't chase them. I was done chasing. I'd spent a decade being the one who checked in, the one who reached out, the one who smoothed things over. This time, they'd have to come to me. And for a while, I thought maybe they wouldn't. Until the text came. It was a Wednesday. I'd just finished a late meeting with a new developer I'd hired for the mentorship app, which, by the way, was finally starting to look like something real. We'd settled on a name, Pulsebridge, and even had a working beta that Kayla had stress-tested to the brink of collapse. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and a stomach full of vending machine pretzels when I saw it. "Mom, can you come by Sunday? We're doing a family brunch. Would love to see you. We miss you." I stared at the message for a long time. Not "I'm sorry." Not "let's talk." Just a polite summons, like I was a court jester expected to return to duty. Still, I was curious. Part of me wanted to say no. The other part, the strategic part, wanted to see what this was really about. So I texted back. "Me? Sure. I'll bring muffins." Sunday came. It was a warm spring day, one of those rare mornings where the air feels like a clean slate. I wore jeans, a t-shirt, and brought a box of blueberry muffins from the bakery near my office. When I got there, I noticed immediately Connor's car wasn't in the driveway. Neither was Avery's. Inside, my mom was setting the table with forced cheer. My dad stood at the coffee machine, avoiding eye contact like it owed him money. "Where's Connor?" I asked. "He and Avery are taking a break," my mom said quickly. "They're giving each other space." I blinked. "Since when?" She waved a hand. "It's not important." Oh, there it was. The real reason they'd invited me. The atmosphere had that nervous feeling to it. The kind where people pretend everything's fine while their entire house is sinking. I played dumb, sat down, accepted a cup of coffee, and waited. It didn't take long. My dad cleared his throat halfway through a conversation about someone's neighbor's dog, then said, "So, your brother's had a rough couple of weeks." I nodded slowly. I heard. "He's in a bit of a bind." There it was. The ask. "What kind of bind?" I said, taking a bite of a muffin. "Well, he might be losing his job," my mom said gently. "And with the breakup and everything, he's really been struggling." "And," my dad added, "he mentioned that you were working on some new projects. Big ones. Sounds like things are going well for you." I tilted my head. "Is this the part where you ask if I'm hiring?" They both looked at each other. My mom smiled in that tight, hopeful way. "We just thought it would mean a lot if you could give him a chance." I set my coffee down. "What kind of chance?" "You know," my dad said. "Maybe bring him on. Let him assist. Something to get him back on his feet." So there it was. After everything, the years of neglect, the constant favoritism, the party, the humiliation, they wanted me to rescue him. Again, I leaned back. What happened at Cornerstone? They hesitated. I already knew. Word had gotten back to me through the client network. After Avery's mess and her spectacular exit, she resigned before HR could finalize the termination. Connor's department came under scrutiny. His role had been restructured, which in corporate terms means we realized you contribute nothing and don't want to deal with you anymore. He'd burned that bridge, and now he was swimming toward mine. My mom softened her voice. "He's trying, Miles. He just needs someone to believe in him." I let the silence hang there for a second. Then I nodded. "Okay," I said. Her face lit up. "Really? Sure. Tell him to send me a resume." That night, I got the email. His resume was a joke. 2 pages of inflated buzzwords and fake achievements, including a strategic lead role on a project I personally built from scratch while he was on vacation in Miami. But I didn't delete it. No. Instead, I started planning. Because I realized something in that moment. I had more power than they ever gave me credit for. And if I played this right, I could finally teach them what it feels like to be on the other end of the imbalance. But not by screaming, not by lashing out, by doing what I do best, being underestimated. The next step was quiet. I reached out to Kayla, told her I had a weird favor to ask. I needed her to act as a recruiter, fake name, fake firm, and call Connor about a position at a fast-scaling tech startup looking for a hungry SDR with grit. The kind of job that sounded flashy and fun, but was ultimately high pressure and all smoke. Kayla laughed. "So you're giving him the rope?" "I'm just showing him the edge," I said. "Whether he trips or jumps is up to him." Meanwhile, I sent him a polite rejection from MJT Systems. Said we weren't hiring at the moment, but wished him the best. Within a week, Kayla, under the name Rachel, reported back. Connor had jumped at the bait. He'd scheduled an interview. Even bragged about how he grew up around tech and had inside connections in the industry. It was going exactly as expected. The trap wasn't the job. The trap was what would come after. While that played out, I kept working on PulseBridge. We pushed the beta out to a few nonprofit orgs who agreed to try it internally. Feedback was incredible. Real people were using the platform to navigate burnout, workplace stress, and leadership gaps. For the first time in a while, I was building something that mattered, not just for profit, but for people. It felt good, clean, free. And then, the final piece fell into place. One of our major contracts at MJT, a citywide education initiative, had recently been passed off to a new partner firm for implementation. That firm, a boutique consulting agency co-owned by someone who used to work with Cornerstone. Guess who they just hired as a junior contractor? Avery. Small world, right? I ran into her at a conference mixer. She didn't see me at first. She was talking animatedly about her new start and how toxic environments make you stronger. I stood nearby, sipping my drink, until she turned and locked eyes with me. Her face froze. I gave a small nod. No smile. Just enough to remind her, I see you. I always see you. And then I walked away. Because the real setup wasn't about humiliating her. It was about showing her that no matter where she went, she'd always be walking through doors I built. Now, everything was in place. Connor had bitten. Avery had stumbled. My parents had no idea the game was even happening. All that was left was the final move. And trust me, it was coming. The week it all came together, I barely had to lift a finger. Connor had been hyping himself up in the family group chat for days. Not to me, of course, just to mom and dad. Big tech opportunity, he kept calling it. Startup energy, but with real capital. He dropped buzzwords he didn't understand and humble bragged about his third-round interview with a fake recruiter. My mom responded with prayer hands emojis and told him she always knew he'd find his lane. I didn't say a word. It was surreal, honestly. Watching it unfold like a slow-motion car crash where you already know the outcome. Because here's the thing, I wasn't setting him up to fail. I wasn't faking a job offer or stringing him along for the punchline. The job did exist, technically. Kayla's recruiting firm had been a test branch for PulseBridge, designed specifically to simulate high-pressure work environments and track how applicants responded under stress. It was opt-in, of course, part of a controlled research pilot we were running with transparency clauses buried in the terms. But let's be real, Connor never read those. He just clicked agree and started performing. His role was a 10-day contract. Trial basis. Commission only. The kind of position real grinders use to prove themselves, not trust fund babies trying to cosplay as entrepreneurs. By day 3, he was already complaining. They're on me like every hour, he texted my dad. Want updates like I'm some robot. Not cool. Whole place is chaotic, man. They need structure. Oh, the irony. By day 6, Kayla called me. He tried to sell the software to a competitor, she said, stifling laughter. Like actual cold outreach to another firm. Said he had connections and thought it'd impress us. And we flagged it. Put it in the report. Let him twist. I didn't even have to ask what came next. On day 10, he was formally let go via a performance email. Respectful, honest, and signed by Rachel with a generic HR footer. He was livid. My mom called that night. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounded tight. Accusatory. I don't know what's going on with that company Connor worked for, but he said it was the most toxic place he's ever been. People yelling at him. Confusing tasks. They just dropped him without warning. Can you believe that? Oh, I could believe it. But I wasn't done yet. Not until I told them the truth and made sure it stuck. The opportunity came that weekend, during what was supposed to be a family check-in brunch. My mom insisted it would clear the air and bring everyone back together. I didn't trust it, but I said yes. I'd been patient long enough. We met at a little diner they liked. White tablecloths, fake flowers in mason jars, a chalkboard menu written in pastel. I showed up 5 minutes early. They showed up 20 minutes late. Connor strutted in wearing sunglasses indoors, like he was trying to disguise failure as fashion. My dad gave me a stiff handshake. My mom hugged me a second too long, like guilt was perfume she could rub off on me. So, my mom said once we were all seated, I know it's been tense, but we're still family, and that means something. I sipped my coffee. Connor leaned back in his chair. Look, man, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but I get it. You're successful, or whatever. Congrats. But don't act like you're better than us. I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you think I've been doing? He shrugged. I'm just saying, it's not cool to look down on people. You embarrassed Avery, then acted like I was some loser for needing help. Like you've never had a rough patch. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a small black folder. Set it on the table. Slid it toward him. What's this? He asked. Your rough patch. Documented. The past 10 days of your big tech opportunity. Every interaction, every skipped task, every failed assignment. Complete with timestamps. He flipped it open, confused, then slowly paled. My mom leaned over. Wait, how did you get this? I didn't get it, I said. I commissioned it. Silence. What? Connor asked, voice thin. I own the pilot program you just failed out of, I said, calmly. Pulsebridge. It's mine. You didn't get recruited. You got studied. My dad stiffened. You what? I gave you the chance you asked for, I said, turning to my mom. I reviewed your resume. I watched your interviews. I gave you a real opportunity to show who you are when nobody's holding your hand. And you blew it. Connor looked like he'd been slapped. You set me up? No, I said. You set yourself up. I just finally stopped padding your fall. He shoved the folder away, eyes blazing. This is insane. You think this makes you the good guy? No, I said. I think it makes me free. My mom blinked rapidly, trying to hold onto the narrative. Miles, this is cruel. He was trying. No, Mom. I was trying. For years. While you ignored me. While you praised his every stumble as if it were a leap. While you watched me carry this family and still asked why I wasn't smiling more. I stood up, voice steady. I'm done being the background character in a story I wrote. They didn't follow me out. Didn't call after me. Just sat there, stunned. And I didn't look back. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've cut contact. Not out of spite, out of necessity. The space has been clean, quiet, healing. Pulsebridge officially launched last month and landed its first major institutional partnership. Kayla is now my co-founder. We have 5 full-time staff, and the feedback we're getting from users? It's better than I ever dreamed. Connor moved back in with my parents. He's trying to get into crypto now. I wish him luck. As for Avery, she got let go from the consulting firm. Turns out, coasting on charm only gets you so far when people actually read your emails. Sometimes I think about reaching out, just to say, see? But then I remember the real lesson. I never needed them to see me. I just needed to stop shrinking for them. And the day I did, that was the day everything changed. Because some bridges aren't burned out of anger, they're torched to light the road forward. I'm Jake, I'm 29, and I've been a construction worker for the past 10 years. It's not glamorous, it's hard work, but it pays the bills, and I've made a good life out of it. I've got a decent place, a reliable truck, and a circle of friends who respect me for what I do. But there's always been this tension with my family, especially with my sister, Emma. She's 5 years younger than me, and for most of our lives, I've always felt like I was living in her shadow. She's the golden child, the one everyone praises for being a doctor in the making. She's brilliant, no doubt. But there's always been this sense of superiority she's had over me, as if my job isn't worthy of respect just because it doesn't come with a degree or a white-collar title. Things really started to fall apart around 2 years ago when Emma got into med school. My parents were thrilled, and I was happy for her too. Med school is no joke, and I knew she'd be busting her ass for years to come. What I didn't expect was how quickly she'd start leaning on me. Not emotionally, but financially. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no stranger to helping out family. I've always tried to be there for them, especially Emma. I'm the kind of guy who won't hesitate to lend a hand, even if it means putting myself out. But things were starting to feel a bit one-sided. At first, it was small things. Hey, can you help with a few $100 for rent this month? The loans are kicking in, and I'm tight. I didn't think twice. Emma's my sister. But soon, it wasn't just rent. Can you help with tuition this semester? I don't want to take out another loan. Then, it was medical supplies for her studies. Every time I turned around, there was another request, and it was getting harder and harder to say no. I'd scrimped and saved to get ahead, but she was burning through my savings like it was nothing. The guilt trip was relentless. I know you've got the money, Jake. You don't really need it, do you? But the thing that really got me was what happened that Christmas. I'd been working a 12-hour shift right before the holiday, exhausted and ready to crash. Emma, as usual, was having a huge gathering at her place. Mom and Dad were there, and the whole extended family was coming over to celebrate. I'd been invited, of course, but I just wasn't feeling it this year. After the year of constant requests for money and all the pressure from her to show up for her, I thought I'd skip it. I sent a text to Emma saying I'd be staying home this year, just to relax. "I'm sorry, I'm really wiped. I'll catch up with you all another time." Her response was swift and sharp. "You better be there, Jake. It's Christmas. You can't just bail because you're too tired. If you don't come, don't bother showing up ever again. You're just a construction worker anyway. What else do you have to do?" I was stunned. I stared at that message for what felt like forever, rereading it over and over. It wasn't the first time Emma had belittled my job, but this was the first time it had really hit me. I've always been proud of the work I do. I've put in so much effort to get to where I am. And here was my own sister, mocking me like that, just because I wasn't a doctor or lawyer or whatever she considered worthy. I didn't reply to her text. I didn't even go to the family dinner. Instead, I stayed home, watching TV, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. It wasn't the first time she'd been rude, but this was different. This was personal. She'd crossed a line. A few days later, I get a call from Mom. "Jake, what happened? Emma's upset, and now you're causing drama. Just go to her party." "What's the big deal? We're family." I snapped. "What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that Emma thinks I'm nothing more than a tool to pay her bills." "I'm not a bank, Mom. I'm her brother." Mom sighed, her voice softening. "Jake, it's just, she's under a lot of stress with med school. You've always had a stable job, and she's struggling." "She doesn't mean it like that." I couldn't believe it. "She does mean it like that, Mom. She doesn't care about me. She only cares about what I can do for her." The next week, I decided I needed some space from it all. I didn't answer any of Emma's calls or texts. I thought about it long and hard, and something inside me snapped. I was done being her ATM, done being her punching bag. She'd always acted like she was better than me because she had a degree and big dreams of becoming a doctor. I was tired of her treating me like garbage. Then came the day she called me, and it was the one that would change everything. It was about 4 months after Christmas. I had been keeping my distance, living my life. I wasn't rude to her. I just wasn't playing her game anymore. But Emma called, and this time, her tone was different. "Jake, I really need your help. I'm behind on my rent, and I don't know what I'm going to do. You're my only option." I paused. That old familiar guilt tugged at me, but I wasn't going to fall for it again. Not this time. Not after everything she'd said. "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't help you this time." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to process my refusal. "Then," she said, her voice trembling, "What do you mean, you can't help? You always help. You have to help. I'm going to fail out of med school if I can't pay this rent. Do you want that on your conscience?" I took a deep breath. "Emma, you've never once thought about what's on my conscience. You've used me for your entire adult life, and I've had enough. You can figure it out on your own." That's when it happened. The final straw. Emma started to scream. "You selfish bastard. How could you do this to me? After everything I've done for you, and you can't help me? Fine then. Don't bother showing up for Christmas next year, or any other family event. You're just a construction worker anyway. What do you even have to offer?" The words hit harder than I expected. But this time, they didn't have the same effect. Instead of feeling guilty, I felt something else. Something freeing. Like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I was done. Done with her and her entitled attitude. I didn't reply. I hung up the phone, and in that moment, I realized I was done with the constant financial support. I wouldn't pay for her med school anymore. I wouldn't help her with rent, and I wouldn't sit by and watch her treat me like I was beneath her. And that's when things got really interesting. She called me again a week later, but this time, it was different. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. "Jake, please. I didn't mean what I said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You know I didn't mean it. Can we talk? I really need you right now. I'll do anything. Just please help me." I could feel the shift, but it was too late. I wasn't the same person who would bend over backward for her anymore. And that's when the true revenge started. I sat there for a minute, holding my phone, listening to Emma's voice crackle with a mix of guilt and fear. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the compulsion to drop everything and help her. Instead, I felt something empowering. It was like I had finally taken control. She'd spent so long treating me like I was only useful when I could throw money at her problems, and now I was the one who was setting the terms. But I wasn't about to make it easy on her. I wasn't going to just forgive her because she finally realized she was wrong. This wasn't a moment of reconciliation, it was a moment of payback. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it slide. So, I let her stew for a little while longer. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even pick up when she called again a couple of days later. She texted me, too, pleading, apologizing, and promising she'd make it up to me. Her words were so different from the venom she had spat at me before. I could almost hear the desperation in them, the realization that her usual tactics weren't working anymore. But I didn't care. She had shown me who she truly was, and now, I wasn't just some guy she could manipulate anymore. The next weekend, I went to my parents' house for dinner. They had no idea what had gone down between Emma and me. They just thought it was another one of those sibling squabbles that we'd get over. I wasn't even planning on bringing it up, but as soon as Emma saw me sitting at the dinner table, she froze. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. The thing was, I wasn't the same Jake she used to know, the one who would drop everything to help her out. No, I was a different version now, someone who wasn't afraid to put his foot down. She came over to me, a hesitant smile on her face, trying to act like nothing had happened. "Hey, Jake, have you been?" she asked, in that overly sweet tone she only used when she was trying to manipulate me. I looked her straight in the eye and didn't even blink. "I've been good, Emma. How about you?" I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Good, yeah. Just stressed, you know, med school, everything." "Yeah, I know," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I know all about stress and the pressure that comes with it. It's tough when you don't know who you can rely on, huh?" Her face flushed. I saw the faintest trace of guilt in her eyes. She knew what I was getting at, but she wasn't ready to admit it. Mom, oblivious to the tension, chimed in from the other side of the table. "Jake, are you two still fighting? What's going on? You've always been so close." I shook my head, pretending like it was just another normal family argument. "We're fine, Mom. I don't know. It's just a lot lately." Emma shot me a quick, angry glance, but I didn't budge. I wasn't about to show her any sympathy. Later, when dinner was winding down, Emma tried to talk to me privately in the kitchen. I could tell she was trying to approach me differently this time, almost like she was walking on eggshells. "Jake, can we talk for a second? I'm really sorry for what I said. I know I hurt you, and I shouldn't have." I just stared at her, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. "Emma, it's not about what you said. It's about how you've treated me my whole life. You've always seen me as just the guy who helps when things get tough. I'm not your personal bank." She flinched, but I wasn't backing down. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to act like that," she said, her voice quieter now. "I've been under so much stress with school, and I didn't realize how much I was pushing you. I know you've been there for me, and I appreciate it. I guess I didn't know how to say it." "Yeah, well, maybe it's time you figured it out," I said bluntly. "Because I'm done playing that game." There was a long silence between us. She looked like she was about to say something, but she hesitated, her words caught in her throat. I knew she was trying to process it all, but I wasn't about to let her backpedal. Not this time. When the conversation ended, she walked away without saying anything else. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. The regret, the guilt, and the realization that I wasn't going to forgive her easily. She had always counted on me to come through for her, but now, the tables had turned. The next few weeks were a bit of a whirlwind. Emma tried reaching out to me again, texting me daily, calling me, even showing up at my work once. But I held firm. Each time, I calmly told her I wasn't going to be helping her anymore, and I wasn't about to let her guilt trip me into feeling sorry for her. She tried to manipulate me with sweet words, but I wasn't fooled anymore. I wasn't the guy who would let his family walk all over him. The more she begged, the more I realized how deep her entitlement ran, and that just made me more resolute in my decision to stop giving her anything. One day, she called me again. This time, her voice was desperate, but it wasn't the pleading that got to me. It was the tone, the genuine panic in her voice. "Jake, I can't do this. I'm going to fail. I've lost everything. I can't afford rent, and if I don't pay it, I'll get kicked out. I don't know where else to turn. Please help me." I didn't say anything at first. I just let her talk, let the silence between us grow heavy. And then, when she finally paused to catch her breath, I spoke. "You know, Emma, The truth is, I think you need to learn something. You need to learn what it's like to face the consequences of your actions. You can't keep running to me every time things get tough." There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, I could hear the tears in her voice. "I get it. I've been awful. Please, Jake. I know I've messed up, but I don't know what to do without your help." And for the first time, I felt no sympathy. None. Just a cold sense of finality. "You'll figure it out," I said, and hung up. The next day, I went online and made a public post in our family group chat. I detailed everything, every penny I had lent her, every time she'd taken advantage of me, and how much I had done for her. I wasn't doing it to shame her, but to make sure everyone knew the truth. That's when Emma's world really started to unravel. But that was only the beginning. The moment I hit send on that message, I knew it would stir things up. I didn't expect it to escalate this quickly, though. My phone buzzed almost immediately with notifications, but it wasn't the usual supportive family comments I was used to seeing. It was a string of messages from Emma, calling me selfish, heartless, and ungrateful for everything she had done for me in the past. I almost laughed. She had a remarkable ability to twist things to fit her narrative. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat back and watched the fallout unfold. Mom called first, and I could hear the panic in her voice. "Jake, what's going on? Why did you post that? You know your sister is already under a lot of pressure with med school." "I know, Mom, but she's been using me as a safety net for years, and I'm done. I'm not just going to keep enabling her, especially when she treats me like I'm some kind of ATM." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "But she's your sister," Mom said, her voice small, almost pleading. "I know she's my sister, but that doesn't give her the right to treat me like this," I replied. "I'm not going to be her fall guy anymore." Mom sighed deeply. "You're making a big mistake, Jake. You're hurting her. She's been through so much." I didn't know what to say. All I could think about was the way Emma had treated me, the countless times she'd only come around when she needed something, never just to be a sister. And honestly, I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Then came Dad. His call was just as tense, but he took a different approach. He was calm, methodical, trying to reason with me. "Jake, I get that you're upset, but don't you think you're going too far? This isn't how we handle things in this family." I bit back a sarcastic laugh. "So, what? I should just keep being her ATM, keep bailing her out when she's too busy to figure things out on her own. Family is about support. You've always been there for each other. You can't just turn your back on her like this," Dad insisted. "I'm not turning my back on her, Dad. I'm just not going to keep enabling her behavior. She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet." But my parents weren't the only ones reaching out. I started getting messages from some of my extended family, my aunts, uncles, and cousins questioning me, telling me I was wrong, that I was being harsh. Some even said Emma was under too much stress with med school, that she had every right to ask for help. I couldn't believe it. All these people who had never had to deal with the way Emma treated me were suddenly trying to paint me as the villain. It was like no one understood what it felt like to always be the one giving without ever getting anything in return. Then came Emma's response. It was a text, a long one, full of guilt and anger, mixed with a desperate plea for me to change my mind. She said she didn't know how she'd manage without me, that her entire future was on the line. She begged for my forgiveness, promising that things would be different this time. She even apologized for the things she said to me before, things that stung more than I had let on. I read her message, letting her words sink in. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of the old Jake, the one who would have immediately caved, who would have reached out to offer a hand, who would have convinced himself that family always came first. But not this time. This time, I felt nothing but resolve. The memories of her selfishness, the way she had used me time and time again, pushed away any trace of sympathy. And that was when I realized something. For years, I had been holding myself back, convincing myself that I couldn't be the bad guy. But maybe it wasn't about being the bad guy or the good guy. Maybe it was about finally standing up for myself, about finally letting go of the guilt I had carried for so long. I put my phone down, not even bothering to respond. I had already made up my mind. Emma wasn't getting another penny out of me. She wasn't going to be able to manipulate me into coming back and saving her. She needed to learn what it felt like to take responsibility for her own life. A few days passed without any word from her. But then, the phone call I had been expecting came. It was late in the evening, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through some random stuff on my phone when I saw her name pop up on the screen. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, strained. "Jake, I get it now. I was awful to you, and I'm so sorry. But please, please don't leave me out here alone. I can't do this. I don't know who else to turn to. I'm failing everything, and I just need one more chance. Please." The words felt like a weight, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I had heard this same sob story a dozen times before, and I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. Still, I let the voicemail sit there for a while, knowing it wasn't going to change anything. Then, the following morning, something strange happened. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it, thinking it was just another telemarketer, but I decided to pick up. "Hello, Jake, it's Dr. Hughes from the med school," came the voice on the other end. I froze. What's going on? I'm afraid Emma has been struggling a lot lately. She's been falling behind, and we're concerned about her progress. We were wondering if you might consider helping her out, financially, just to keep her on track. She's at risk of losing her spot in the program, and without your support, I don't know if she'll make it. I felt a sudden rush of frustration, but I kept my voice even. I'm not helping her anymore. I've already told her that. "Well, I wanted to be transparent with you," Dr. Hughes said. "Emma's told us that you've always been a significant support system for her. And frankly, we're worried she might not be able to keep up if she doesn't get the help she needs." There it was. The classic guilt trip. The poor, struggling student narrative, framed in a way that tried to make me feel responsible for her failures. I stood up, pacing the room. "I'm sorry, but I'm not her backup anymore. She needs to figure it out. I'm done." I hung up, and I felt that familiar sense of finality wash over me. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't the bitter feeling of anger that used to consume me when I'd had enough of Emma. It was something more like relief. But then, a few days later, I got another call. This time, it wasn't from Emma. It was from a lawyer. I could barely believe it when I saw the name of the law firm on the caller ID. For a second, I almost thought I'd made a mistake. Maybe it was some sort of scam, or maybe someone was messing with me. But no, I answered the call. "Hello, this is Jake. Mr. Thompson, I'm calling on behalf of Emma," the lawyer said, his voice polite but professional. "She's instructed me to reach out regarding a financial agreement she believes you owe her." I blinked, almost laughing. What? What are you talking about?" "She claims that you had verbally agreed to continue helping her with tuition payments and other financial support for her medical school, and now that you've stopped, she feels that you're breaching an understanding she says you both had." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? She's going to try to sue me over this." The lawyer's voice remained calm, but there was a slight edge, like he was trying to keep control of the situation. "Well, there are other legal options she could pursue, but before we go down that route, I wanted to ensure that we made an attempt to resolve this amicably." I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I was in total shock. How far was Emma willing to go? I could feel the weight of the situation hanging over me, but instead of caving, something inside me snapped. "No," I said firmly. "I'm done. I'm not going to fund her lifestyle anymore, and I'm certainly not going to let her manipulate me with the law. She's been using me for years. If she wants to try and sue me, let her. But she won't get a cent. You can tell her that." There was a brief pause on the other end, then the lawyer replied, "I understand. But you should be aware, this could escalate. I strongly advise you to reconsider." I had a lot of options in that moment. I could have gone to court and fought it out. I could have panicked and started apologizing. But I didn't. I stayed calm. "I'll take my chances," I said. "And you can let Emma know. If she wants to keep pushing me, she'll only make things worse for herself." I hung up. For the next few days, I was left in peace. No calls, no messages, nothing. I figured maybe Emma realized that she wasn't going to scare me into paying her way anymore. Then, almost a week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Emma. Inside, there was a short note written in her unmistakable handwriting. "Jake, I was wrong. I've been selfish, and I've taken you for granted. I thought I could manipulate you into helping me, but I realize now I've burned every bridge I had with you. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect anything from you anymore. I need to fix this on my own, but I don't want to lose my brother." I stared at the letter for a while, my emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to forgive her, wanted to just sweep everything under the rug and pretend it hadn't happened. But the other part of me, the part that had suffered through years of her taking advantage of me, felt something closer to satisfaction. She was finally owning up to what she had done, but it was too little, too late. I threw the letter in the trash. A few months passed, and Emma somehow managed to make it through med school. I didn't hear much from her, and honestly, I didn't care to. She seemed to be on the right track now, but it wasn't because of me. She had to figure things out on her own, and for the first time, I felt proud of her for doing so. But the best part of all this? I was free. Free from the guilt, free from the weight of constantly having to prop her up, free from the expectations that I would always be her safety net. I wasn't her bank anymore, and I wasn't going to be her emotional punching bag. Family wasn't supposed to be about using each other. It was about supporting each other when it counted, not just when it was convenient. And Emma, for all her flaws, was finally learning that. The calls stopped coming. The drama faded. And for the first time in years, I could breathe easy, knowing that I wasn't her doormat anymore. I never got another letter, and I never had to help her again. And I was okay with that. My name's Eric, and I'm 29 years old. Until recently, I thought I understood what family meant. I believed it was about mutual support, unconditional love, and being there for one another when life got messy. But that idea, that illusion, really unraveled in the most brutal and humiliating way one Tuesday evening over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. My father, Frank, a stern, stoic man who rarely showed emotion unless he was mad, looked me dead in the eye with a calmness that chilled me to the bone and said, "You work so your brother can have a good life. That's just how families work." My mother didn't argue. She didn't blink. She just nodded like a puppet that had run out of strings to pull. The room felt quiet after that. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that makes your skin crawl. My younger brother, Jason, was seated across from me, smirking slightly, shoveling another bite of food into his mouth without a care in the world. Jason, who hadn't held a job for longer than 3 months at a time, who had crashed 2 cars I helped pay for, who once called me crying at 3 a.m. because he overdrafted his account trying to impress some girl at a rooftop bar. Yeah, that Jason. I stared at them, my so-called family, and it hit me like a truck. I was never a son to them. I was a resource, a walking bank account, their safety net, their invisible lifeline. I didn't say a word that night. I finished my dinner in silence, pushing down every feeling crawling up my throat. Anger, betrayal, sadness. I smiled weakly when Mom offered pie, said, "No thanks, I've got work early tomorrow," and excused myself. But when I got home to my apartment, a place I paid for but rarely lived in because I was always driving back to their house to help out, I sat down on the edge of the bed and let it all hit me. 29 years. 29 years of picking up the pieces for them. Of saying, "It's okay," when they forgot my birthday again. Of loaning money with no expectation of it coming back. Of bailing Jason out because he's just struggling right now. Of listening to Dad's rants about how I owed this family everything because they took me in when I had no one. As if I hadn't spent the last decade paying that debt 10 times over. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my desk, running through everything in my head. The endless list of things I'd sacrificed, relationships, travel, hobbies, even job opportunities, because they needed me. I remembered how, just a few months ago, I had turned down a project lead role in another city because it would have been too far from home, and Dad guilt-tripped me into thinking I was abandoning them. Jason needed help. Mom needed help. The dog needed surgery. The roof needed replacing. There was always something. Always. The next day, I called out of work. Not because I was sick, but because I was done. I took out a couple of boxes, started packing up the essentials. I contacted my job and asked if the out-of-state transfer was still open. Turns out it was. I started making arrangements, quietly. No announcements. No warnings. I withdrew from the shared account I'd been stupid enough to let them access. Yep, my paycheck went into an account where Mom handled family expenses. I canceled the auto payments on their bills. I called the insurance company and took my name off their policy. They didn't even notice, too used to things just magically getting paid. For 2 weeks, I played the role. I smiled during dinners. I helped Jason with his side business, which basically meant I wrote resumes for job interviews he never showed up to. I nodded politely when Dad went on about family values and how I'd never understand real responsibility. It was like watching a play you already knew the ending to. But I was calm. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was the one in control, like the strings weren't attached to me anymore. Then came the moment. A Friday evening, late spring. Warm breeze, lawn freshly cut, the smell of barbecue in the air. Dad was in the backyard, beer in hand, talking to a neighbor about how hard it is raising 2 boys. like I was still a teenager crashing on his couch. Jason was in the garage, trying to fix the motorcycle I had bought him last year. Mom was inside on the couch, watching one of those crime shows she liked. I walked in with 2 bags and my laptop case. Going somewhere? Dad asked, not even turning to look. Yeah, I said casually. Moving. Jason peeked his head out, a confused frown on his face. Moving? What do you mean? I'm done, I said, calmly, not looking at any of them. You wanted me to work so Jason could live a good life. Well, congrats. Now you can figure out how to make that happen without me. Mom stood up, face pale. Eric, what are you talking about? What's going on? I've been your crutch for years. Paying for everything, bailing you out, being your emotional and financial punching bag. But I'm not doing it anymore. I've accepted a transfer. I'm leaving the state. And before you say anything, I left the bills in the mail. They're due next week. Dad laughed. Actually laughed. You're being dramatic. You'll be back. You always come back. I looked at him for a long time. His smug expression, his absolute certainty that I'd always be there, no matter how badly they treated me. No, I said, not this time. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't slam the door. I just walked. And the silence behind me, that was the best sound I'd ever heard. But the fallout, the fallout didn't take long. It started the very next morning. First, there were missed calls. A dozen of them, all from Mom. Then came the texts. Eric, your father is furious. Please call me. We need to talk about this. This isn't how we solve family problems. I didn't respond. I turned off read receipts and silenced my phone. I spent the morning unpacking boxes in my new apartment, halfway across the state, sipping coffee in peace for the first time in what felt like years. The quiet was unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. For once, there wasn't a constant list of demands buzzing around my head. By the afternoon, my dad had stepped in. His texts were less gentle. You think you're better than us now? Don't forget who raised you. You're just having a tantrum. Grow up and come home. I sat on the couch, reading each one like they were lines in a bad play. No apology. No accountability. Just the usual manipulation wrapped in entitlement. I didn't answer him either. By Monday, the panic had set in. Jason texted, Bro, did you shut off the Wi-Fi? None of our stuff is working. Then, wait, is the electric out too? And finally, yo, why is the landlord saying we owe $1,400? I'd already informed the landlord that I would no longer be covering rent. My name had been taken off the lease 2 weeks before I left. Jason had no idea because he never paid attention to anything he didn't directly benefit from. I knew exactly how this would unfold. I wasn't being cruel. I was being fair. For the first time in my life, I was holding them accountable. That evening, I got a voicemail from Mom. She didn't yell, but her voice was shaking. Not with sadness, but with fear. Real, honest fear. Eric, I need you to understand. Your father, he's not taking this well. The power's out. I can't even heat up food. Jason has no way to get to his interview tomorrow. The car insurance lapsed. Please, honey, this isn't right. We're your family. That word, family, used like a weapon again. But this time it didn't pierce me. It bounced right off. Over the next few days, the messages turned into pleas. Jason sent a voice note. Come on, man, I've got nothing right now. Just help us get back on our feet. 1 month, that's all I'm asking. Just until I get this job. I didn't play it. I didn't have to. I already knew the script by heart. Then came the guilt. A handwritten letter from my mom, forwarded by a mutual cousin who lived nearby. It was long, emotional. She talked about raising me, about birthday parties, scraped knees, school plays. She reminded me of the Christmas I got the bike I'd always wanted. The time she stayed up with me all night when I had the flu. And for a moment, I almost softened. But then I remembered what she said the night Dad told me I was working to give Jason a good life. She nodded, silent, compliant. Not even a flicker of defense for me. Not a whisper of dissent. That was her choice. And this was mine. A week passed. I started settling into my new life. I got coffee with a coworker who also transferred from our home office. I went to the gym. I even picked up my old hobby again. Painting, something I hadn't done since college. My apartment didn't feel like a crash pad anymore. It felt like mine. Clean, quiet, free of expectations. The weight was gone from my chest, and I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. But back home, things were spiraling. Word got around. My cousin told me the power still hadn't been turned back on. Jason missed his interview. The cable was cut. My dad tried to apply for a loan in my name. He still had old documents of mine, but thankfully, I'd frozen my credit. He was furious, stormed down to the bank only to be told he didn't have access anymore. He sent me a single text after that. One line, "You'll regret this." No, I wouldn't. The kicker came when Mom tried to sell my old car, the one I'd let Jason borrow. Turns out it was still under my name. I'd reported it stolen the day after I moved. Cops didn't arrest anyone, but they did show up at the house. That must have been a real moment of clarity for them. The car was impounded. Jason raged on social media, writing cryptic posts about betrayal and fake family. I didn't respond, but they weren't done yet. Not even close. Late one night, I got a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the peephole and froze. My father, standing there in his wrinkled polo and scuffed boots, fists clenched, eyes wild. He knocked again, louder this time. "Eric, open this damn door." I stood completely still, heart hammering in my chest. He shouldn't have known where I lived. I had gone to lengths to keep it private. I hadn't told anyone the exact address, just the city. Then I remembered something. 2 weeks ago, Mom asked if I could at least send Jason the name of the complex so he could look into transferring schools. I thought nothing of it. I didn't give a unit number, didn't think they'd come here. But now he was outside, furious, unhinged. "Eric, don't make me call the cops on my own son," he yelled. The irony almost made me laugh. But I didn't open the door. I stepped back, picked up my phone, and dialed the number I'd saved just in case this very moment ever came. "Hi, yes. I need to report someone trespassing at my apartment. He's shouting, won't leave. I believe he followed me from another city. His name is Frank Collins." "Yes, my father." As I watched his silhouette pacing behind the peephole, muttering and swearing to himself, sirens began to echo in the distance. And in that moment, I realized something. For the first time in my life, they were finally going to learn what life costs without their personal ATM. By the time the patrol car pulled up outside, my father was still standing on the walkway, arms crossed like he owned the building, like he could knock once, and I'd come crawling back with an apology and a checkbook. But when those red and blue lights hit his face, I watched something shift in his expression. It wasn't panic. Not yet. It was confusion, like he couldn't believe this was actually happening, like he was the one being wronged. I cracked the window slightly from behind the blinds and listened. One of the officers, a calm but firm woman, approached him. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance. Do you live here?" "No, but my son does," he barked, emphasizing the word like it gave him rights. "I'm here because he's lost his damn mind and I need to talk to him." The officer nodded slowly. "And he asked you to come here?" He hesitated. "No, but I'm his father. We have business." "Business doesn't entitle you to show up at someone's residence uninvited and start yelling," she said. "I'm going to need you to leave the premises." That was when he snapped. "You don't understand," he growled. "That ungrateful little brat owes us, me, everything. I worked 2 jobs when he was a kid. I gave him a roof. Now he thinks he's too good for us. He cuts us off, lets his mother sit in a freezing house, and I'm just supposed to walk away." The officer didn't flinch. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave the property, or I'll have no choice but to escort you off." He stared at her, breathing heavily, then glanced up toward my window, as if he knew I was watching. His face twisted with a look I'd seen only a handful of times in my life. Not anger, not disappointment, something deeper. Powerlessness. It wasn't a look my father wore often. He was a man who commanded, who demanded, and for the first time, someone else was drawing the lines. He turned slowly, muttered something under his breath, and walked away, his shoulders tense like they were made of rope pulled too tight. The officers waited until he was fully down the street before getting back in the car. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about what he said, about how he framed himself as the victim, how easily he slipped into that role the second things stopped going his way. And part of me still questioned if I was doing the right thing. After all, this was my family, my blood. But every time that doubt crept in, I remembered the night at the dinner table. The way he said, "You work so your brother can have a good life." Like I was a tool, not a person. Like my existence had a function, and when it stopped being useful, I'd be cast aside. The next morning, I got an email from my mother. Subject line, "Please, just read. Eric, I don't agree with how your father handled things. I never have. But I also didn't stop him, and for that, I'm sorry. I think I let fear make me quiet for too many years. I've depended on you more than I should have, and I see now how unfair that's been. Your father is stubborn, but he's also scared. The world is changing around him, and he doesn't know how to live in it. Jason. Well, Jason has never had to learn to be independent. Maybe we all did you a disservice by making you carry the weight for so long. I won't ask you to come back. But please, let's talk. Just you and me. No pressure. No guilt. I miss you. Mom. I sat with that email for a long time. It wasn't an apology. Not a full one anyway. But it was something. A crack in the armor. And it was the first time she used the word unfair. That alone made me pause. But the idea of talking to her, just her, felt like a minefield. Because I didn't trust myself not to cave if she started crying. I'd always been soft when it came to Mom. She wasn't the loud one. She didn't throw things or raise her voice. But her silence was its own kind of violence. Especially when I was growing up and Dad's rants would echo through the house, and she'd sit in the next room, pretending not to hear. A few days passed. I didn't respond. I went to work, kept my head down, met a few more coworkers. There was a girl named Lena from marketing who invited me out for drinks with a group. I almost said no. But then I thought, why not? It was the first time in years I had nothing tying me down. No excuse to hide behind. No family emergency waiting to drag me back. That night, I laughed more than I had in months. Maybe years. And when I got home, I sat down at my desk, opened Mom's email again, and typed a short reply. I'm not ready to talk. Maybe one day, but not yet. I hovered over the send button for a moment, then clicked it. The next morning, I had another message. Not from Mom. From Jason. Subject line. You're really proud of yourself, huh? Can't believe you're just letting us crash and burn. You're sick. You think this makes you strong? It doesn't. It makes you cold. You're not better than us, Eric. You're just bitter. Enjoy your little escape while it lasts. We'll see how far you get when no one's there to cover for you anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't even finish reading it. Instead, I walked to the window, looked out at the street below, calm, bright, filled with people who didn't know me or what I had just walked away from. It was terrifying and exhilarating. And deep down, I knew Jason wasn't done. He wasn't going to let go that easily. He was just getting started. I didn't reply to Jason's email. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it was. The last desperate scream of someone whose safety net had been cut, flailing for a ledge that no longer existed. For years, Jason had coasted on the assumption that someone else, me, would always take the fall, always show up, always pay. He wasn't prepared for a world where consequences actually landed in his lap. But I was. I'd lived in that world all my life. 2 weeks passed. Things got quiet. No more voicemails, no texts. I thought maybe they were finally getting it. Maybe Dad had found some other scapegoat, or Jason had found a way to manipulate someone else into footing his bills. I allowed myself a cautious sense of peace. I was sleeping better, working harder, talking to Lena more. I'd even started looking into buying my own place, something I never imagined doing before because I was too wrapped up in everyone else's problems to consider my own future. But then came the knock. I was getting ready for work, tie half-tied, coffee in hand, when someone pounded on the door. Not a knock, a pound. I froze. Something about it felt wrong. I looked through the peephole. Jason. He looked like a mess. Greasy hair, faded hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder like a kid who'd missed the school bus. His eyes were sunken, and his jaw was twitching. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. What do you want? You serious, man? His voice cracked, high-pitched with desperation. You're really going to talk to me through a door? After everything? Yes, I said. After everything. He stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. I just need a place to crash. 2 nights. 3 max. I've got a friend in Ohio who said he'd help me out, but I need a few days. I missed my last bus because my phone died. Please, Eric. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Not out of anger, out of muscle memory. The urge to help, to fix, to rescue. It was still there, buried deep like a splinter under the skin. But I took a breath and pushed it down. No. He blinked. No? Just no. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. You made your choices. You lived off me for years. Now it's time you live with the consequences. He stared at the door for a long moment, like he thought it might suddenly vanish and I'd be standing there with open arms. But when nothing happened, he snapped. You think you're some kind of hero now? You think cutting us off makes you strong? You're pathetic, Eric. You're not better than me. You're just alone. I smiled faintly. Being alone doesn't scare me anymore. He kicked the door. Just once. A loud, frustrated bang that made the frame shudder. Then he walked away, muttering something I didn't catch. I waited 5 minutes, then looked out the window. He was gone. The next day, I called the property manager and installed a camera over my door, just in case. But that was the last time I saw Jason in person. What came next was predictable. The family gossip train started chugging. Aunt Linda called me out of nowhere, pretending to check in but clearly fishing for dirt. My cousin Leo texted, "Heard Jason's couch surfing. What's going on, man?" Even my old high school best friend got a message from my dad, trying to reach me through someone I still respected. But I stayed quiet. Until the final straw. I got a certified letter. Thick envelope. From a law office. Inside. A lawsuit. Frank and Margaret Collins versus Eric Collins. They were suing me. For financial abandonment. For failure to provide ongoing familial support under implied agreement. Their lawyer claimed I had created a verbal contract by consistently supporting them, and that I owed them compensation for damages they'd suffered after my departure. I sat there, stunned, laughing, then not laughing. I read it over and over again like it might turn into a joke if I squinted hard enough. But it was real, and it was the moment everything truly snapped into focus. They didn't love me. They never saw me as a son. They saw me as a wallet, a plan, a policy. And now that their policy had lapsed, they wanted to sue the insurance company. I hired a lawyer the next morning. I showed her every document I'd kept, screenshots of texts, old bank statements, auto deposits, the shared utility accounts in my name, the email from Mom, the voicemail from Jason, the text where Dad said, "You work so your brother can have a good life." It wasn't just helpful. It was a goldmine. Their case fell apart in court like wet tissue. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, took one look at the evidence and dismissed the suit outright. She even scolded their attorney for wasting the court's time with something so transparently manipulative. My lawyer asked for court costs. The judge approved them. They owed me $4,200 in legal fees. They didn't pay, so we garnished their tax return. I didn't want to do that, but I did, because that's how the real world works. The one I live in now. The one they tried to keep me from entering because they knew, deep down, that once I did, I wouldn't come back. I heard through a cousin that Jason moved in with an old girlfriend. That he's working part-time delivering packages. Good. Maybe for the first time in his life, he'll learn how to survive without someone else covering his rent. My dad, still angry, still bitter. Apparently, he tells anyone who will listen that I betrayed the family. But nobody's really listening anymore. And my mom, she sent me one last letter. No guilt this time. Just a single paragraph. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're doing okay. I was wrong to stay quiet for so long. Whatever happens next, I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I haven't responded. Maybe one day I will. Maybe not. Because I am happy. For the first time in my adult life, I wake up without a weight pressing on my chest. I go to work and come home to silence I chose. I spend my money on me. I laugh with friends who don't need anything from me. And I've started dating Lena. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. The man I used to be. Panicked. Overworked. Begging for scraps of love disguised as gratitude. He's gone. In his place is someone stronger. Wiser. Freer. Someone who finally understands that being a family doesn't mean owing your life to people who never valued it. Being a family means love, respect, and effort on both sides. And if they ever want to earn that again, they'll have to do the one thing they never expected. Work for it. I'm Daniel, 29, and until recently, I'd have told you my family was just a bit distant, not cruel, not abusive, just selective with their warmth. Growing up, it was always about my younger brother, Jake. He was the athlete, the charmer, the one who could do no wrong even when he skipped school or crashed Dad's car. Me? I was the quiet one with books, the one who got teased at dinner for always being so serious. But I never complained. I thought if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe I'd finally be seen as more than just the family's background character. So I did. I kept my head down, got through college with honors, then a scholarship for a master's program in biomedical engineering. It was grueling, late nights, weekends in labs, months of ramen and missed birthdays. But I told myself it would all be worth it the day they saw me walk across that stage. I planned everything months in advance. My graduation ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, and since my family lived just 2 states away, I offered to fly home a day early and then fly them all out at my expense. I even booked a private dining room at a really nice restaurant downtown for the celebration afterward. 10 seats, custom menu, prepaid deposit. I sent the invites in a group chat with all the details and got a mix of lukewarm thumbs-up emojis and one cool from Jake. But I tried not to read into it. People get busy, right? The week leading up to graduation, I barely slept. Not just from the workload, but from excitement. This was it, my moment. I even bought my dad a tie and had it shipped to the house, said in the card, "Can't wait to see you wearing this at graduation." No reply. Still, I kept hoping, kept believing. The morning of the big day, I called my mom to double-check flight times. She didn't answer. I tried again. Nothing. I figured they might be in the air already. The ceremony was at 3 p.m., and I kept checking the reserved seats up front that I'd saved with name cards. They stayed empty. I texted the group, "Where are you guys?" No answer. I tried calling again. Voicemail. I went up on stage, gave my speech to a room of smiling strangers, and my eyes kept flicking to the door. Waiting. Hoping. When it was over, I checked my phone and saw the message from Jake. "We're at Dad's barbecue." No one wanted to sit through another boring speech. LOL. I stared at it for a long time, reading it again and again like maybe it would change. Like maybe the letters would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. But they didn't. That was it. No apology. No regret. Just a casual dismissal of one of the most important days of my life. I went to the restaurant anyway. Table for 10, just like I planned. The hostess looked confused when I told her it would just be me. I sat alone under warm lighting with a perfectly arranged place setting in front of me. The waiter came by, his smile faltering slightly when he saw the untouched glasses around the table. "Should I wait for the others?" he asked. I just shook my head. "They're not coming." I ordered a glass of wine and stared at the flickering candle in the center of the table, wondering how I'd gotten here. Wondering if I'd made some fundamental mistake in expecting something different from them. Then I had a thought, cold, detached, almost mechanical. I flagged the waiter and asked for the check. Paid it in full, tipped well, and asked for a to-go box. Then I walked down the street to the nearest print shop, pulled up the live stream of my graduation on my phone, and took a screenshot of me at the podium. Printed it. Framed it. At the front, just below the image of me standing in front of hundreds of people, I added a small brass plaque, reserved for 10. I mailed the receipt for the dinner, the framed photo, and a link to the full live stream to my parents' house. No note. No explanation. Just the facts. What they didn't know yet, what no one outside of my lab did, was that the day before graduation, my team's project had secured $40 million in private funding. We were going live with development the following month, and I'd just signed on as the lead researcher. My name, Daniel Myers, was about to be printed on something that could change lives. That day, as the camera panned across the auditorium and captured my closing speech, I announced it publicly for the first time. The clip went viral on campus. My inbox filled with congratulations from professors, classmates, even people I'd never met. But from my family? Silence. That is, until an hour later. My sister, Emma, called me. 3 missed calls. Then a text. "Please call me." I had no idea it was this serious. "I feel awful." Then another. "Can we please talk? I think we messed up." And then one more. "Daniel, I'm crying. I'm so sorry. We want to reconnect. Please don't shut us out." I stared at the screen. My phone lit up again. And again. I didn't pick up. Because in that moment, I realized something. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for me. And now? Now I was building my own. I let the phone buzz in my hand until it finally stopped. Emma's name faded from the screen, leaving only the glow of my reflection on the black glass. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and stood at the corner of the street, the cold air cutting through the fabric like the silence had cut through years of effort. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming in. First from Emma, then my mom, then even Jake, who texted, "Didn't know you were doing big stuff. Congrats, I guess. Barbecue was lit though, LOL." The casualness of it nearly made me laugh. It was like a child poking a hornet's nest and acting surprised when he got stung. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on work. The lab was buzzing with energy. We were developing a neural scaffold that had the potential to restore motor function in stroke patients. A massive leap forward if successful. Investors were flying in from 3 different continents. My team started calling me Doc, even though my doctorate was still in progress. I buried myself in it, and every day I didn't answer those texts felt like I was slowly reclaiming a piece of myself. About a week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter from my mom. Handwritten. It started with the usual, "We didn't mean to hurt you." Then, "You've always been so independent, we didn't think you'd care." And finally, "Your dad said it was too expensive to fly everyone out." But Jake was already planning the barbecue, and it felt easier to do one thing together. She ended it with, "We're proud of you, Daniel. We just wish you'd let us say it in person." Let them say it in person? After they ghosted my graduation? After they ate ribs in a backyard while I gave a speech to a crowd of strangers in the biggest moment of my life? I folded the letter once, then again, then slid it back into the envelope and left it on the shelf by my door. Then came the real cherry on top. 2 weeks after graduation, Jake posted a photo on Instagram. It was one of those obnoxious selfies of him shirtless at the lake, holding a beer with a fake deep caption, "Success isn't about degrees. It's about being real." The comment section was full of fire emojis and "preach bro" replies from his usual group of enablers. But nestled between all that noise, I saw a comment from Emma, honestly proud of both my brothers in different ways. That was it. That was the moment I realized they weren't sorry. Not really. They were embarrassed. They were scrambling to rewrite the narrative now that they knew I wasn't just the quiet one with books. I was the one who got out, who made it, and they were too late to be part of it. Still, I said nothing. But life has a funny way of circling back. A month after my announcement, the university hosted a private networking gala for donors, researchers, and selected faculty. It was a big deal: black tie, champagne towers, and a list of people whose names regularly appeared in Forbes. I'd been asked to speak again, this time about innovation and access. My face was on the brochure. And I knew, because of course I knew, that the university sent one of those brochures to every family of graduating honors students. Sure enough, 2 nights before the gala, my dad emailed me. A single line, "We're coming into town this weekend. Want to grab lunch?" I stared at the message like it was radioactive. He hadn't called. He hadn't even acknowledged the photo I'd sent. Just this sudden pop-in invitation, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. The day of the gala, I stepped onto that ballroom stage in a tailored navy suit, my name projected in elegant lettering behind me. I gave a 10-minute speech about resilience, about rising from obscurity not in spite of being underestimated, but because of it. The applause was thunderous. And then, as the crowd dispersed for drinks and photos, I saw them. Standing awkwardly near the entrance were my parents. My mom was wearing the same blue blazer she always wore to important events. My dad looked stiff, like he didn't know how to dress for this kind of success anymore. Emma was with them, smiling a little too wide. Jake wasn't there. They spotted me. My mom raised her hand slightly in a wave. I smiled politely, then turned and walked in the opposite direction. For the rest of the night, I made sure I was always across the room, deep in conversation with funders, laughing with professors, posing with my team for photos. I never once looked back in their direction. They were strangers now, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized they always had been. That night, I checked my phone and saw a final message from Emma. "We were really hoping to talk tonight. You're still our brother. Please let us in." The message from Emma stayed on my screen longer than it should have. I kept rereading it, not because I was considering replying, but because I was trying to figure out when that word, brother, had stopped meaning something. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was gradual. A slow erosion of every ignored phone call, every birthday they skipped, every time they called Jake the successful one, while patting me on the back like I was some family pet that managed not to bark too loud. But that night, something inside me truly shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just shut off the screen, got into bed, and for the first time in years, slept straight through the night. A few weeks passed. The project at the lab was accelerating fast. We were invited to pitch at a health tech summit in Berlin, and I was selected as one of 5 researchers to represent our country. I still wasn't used to this. The way strangers treated me like someone important. How people leaned in when I spoke, wrote down what I said, and sometimes just stared like they were trying to memorize my face. I'd spent most of my life invisible, and now suddenly I wasn't. It was exhilarating and a little terrifying. Then came the feature. One of the summit's media partners reached out to do a spotlight piece on young innovators changing the world. They interviewed me for an hour, asked about my childhood, my motivation, what kept me going. I hesitated when the journalist asked about my support system, my family. I paused, then smiled and said, let's just say I had a lot of space to grow. The piece ran the following week. Full-page photo. My name in bold letters. Quotes about breaking generational patterns and carving out your own legacy. The article went viral in the industry. I got calls from 3 major universities asking if I'd consider teaching part-time. Our lab's inbox filled with investment inquiries. And my parents? They finally called. Not just Emma this time. Not just a half-hearted text. A full-on call from my mother's number. I watched the screen light up and vibrate across my desk as I reviewed a grant proposal. For a split second, I considered answering. Not to reconnect, but to say everything I'd been holding in since the day they didn't show up. But I didn't. Instead, I hit decline. 5 minutes later, I got a text from my dad. We saw the article. We're proud of you, son. Let's talk soon. Things don't have to be this way. That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how easily the roles had flipped. When I was a kid, every time I asked for their attention, their support, their time, I got excuses. Now that they wanted access, suddenly I was the one with the power to say yes or no. And I kept saying no. But life, again, had one more twist waiting for me. A month later, I got a call from a name I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Gloria. My mom's sister. She was always the neutral one, the peacemaker, the person who brought potato salad to every event and tried to keep the peace with passive-aggressive hugs. Daniel, she said after a long pause. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I thought you should know. Your dad's planning something. A surprise birthday party. For you. I blinked. What? Your 30th's coming up. They're trying to throw a party. Huge guest list. Friends, extended family. They want to make it this big thing. Your mom's calling it a reconciliation moment. Thought you'd want to know before invitations go out. I was stunned. Not because they were throwing a party, but because they thought I'd come. They haven't even spoken to me properly, I said quietly. And now they want to parade me around like I'm suddenly a trophy? Gloria sighed. I know. I told them it was a bad idea. But they think if they make it public enough, you'll show. I felt a slow heat crawl up my spine. Not anger, clarity. They want to use me to clean their image, I said. To rewrite the story. Pretend they've always been supportive. There was silence on the line. Then Gloria said, Are you going to go? I didn't respond to Gloria's question that day, but I spent the next few hours pacing around my apartment, chewing on the possibilities like a problem I needed to solve. Every part of me wanted to ignore the whole thing, leave them on read, like they had done to me my entire life. But another part of me, a sharper part, saw the opportunity for what it was. They wanted a performance. They wanted optics. They wanted a shiny redemption arc where they got to pretend they'd always believed in me. So I made a decision. I was going to let them host their party. And I was going to burn the whole illusion to the ground, politely, of course. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived in my inbox. A digital card covered in gold cursive and balloons. Daniel turns 30. Come celebrate a family success story. The event was scheduled for a Saturday evening, hosted at a local country club I didn't even know they had access to. Dress code. Formal. Guest list. Family, friends, old classmates, neighbors, anyone who could be impressed. I RSVP'd yes without a comment. They didn't message back. They probably thought they'd won. In the meantime, I made a few quiet preparations. First, I booked a flight, not to my parents' city, but to a nearby one with a luxury hotel where I could stay in peace. Second, I reached out to my team's media liaison and asked if she'd mind scheduling a press release to go out at exactly 8 p.m. the night of the party. Just something simple, a short blurb announcing that our research team had secured FDA pre-approval for the first round of clinical trials, alongside a new $14 million grant from a major health foundation. She smiled and said, "Happy early birthday." The night of the party, I arrived exactly on time, wearing a tailored black suit and walking calmly past a dozen cars lined up in the circular driveway. It was the kind of event they used to drag me to as a kid, just so I could hand out plates or run and get more drinks while Jake soaked up all the attention. Funny how times change. I walked through the entrance, and the whole room seemed to pause. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. I spotted my mother first, dressed in navy blue, holding a wine glass, her smile too tight to be sincere. My dad stood next to her in a rented tuxedo, already sweating under the collar. Emma hovered near the buffet, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. I scanned the room. All the people who'd spent years calling me the quiet one, the serious one, the one who's always in school, were now smiling and waving like I'd always been the golden child. Jake wasn't there. I walked up to my parents. My mother opened her mouth first. "You look good." I nodded. "I do." Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to do something special. Thought it was time we really showed you how proud we are." "Thanks," I said flatly, and let the silence hang. The party went exactly how I expected. Speeches. Toasts. The DJ playing some middle-of-the-road classics no one really liked. I kept to myself, sipping sparkling water and watching them all orbit around their own fantasy. This idea that we were a close family again, that none of the hurt mattered now that I was successful enough to be acknowledged. Around 7:45, my mother clinked her glass. "Everyone," she said loudly, "if we could have your attention, we want to say a few words about our son, Daniel." The spotlight hit my face. I didn't flinch. Dad stepped forward, clearing his throat like he was about to address Congress. "Daniel has always been brilliant," he began. "Even if we didn't always understand what he was working on, we knew he was destined for great things. And now, we're just so honored to celebrate his achievements with all of you, his friends, his family, his support system." Support system. I smiled. That was the moment. I stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it gently, and said, "Thank you for the kind words, Dad. And thanks, everyone, for coming." I scanned the room. Before I say anything else, I'd like to clear up a small misconception. Some of you may think I got here because I had a great support system, that I was lifted up by a family that always had my back. I looked at my parents. That's not quite true. There were small murmurs. My mother blinked. My father shifted uncomfortably. I continued. "When I graduated with my master's degree last year, I reserved a table for 10 at a restaurant. 10 seats. Every single one of them empty. Instead, my family chose to attend a backyard barbecue. My brother texted me no one wanted to sit through another boring speech." Gasps. A few people turned to my mom, who went pale. That was one of the most important days of my life. Not because of the ceremony, but because it was the day I stopped waiting for their approval. Silence. Absolute silence. "And tonight," I said, smiling, "I'd like to thank you for coming. Because just a few minutes ago, a press release went out to the industry. My team's research is moving into clinical trials. We secured $14 million in new funding, and we're developing a treatment that could give paralyzed patients back the ability to walk." The room erupted in applause, but I kept my eyes on my mother's stunned face. My dad had stopped clapping halfway through. And while I appreciate the gesture of this party, I added, "I want to be very clear. I didn't get here because of my family. I got here in spite of them." I stepped back, set the mic down, and walked out. People tried to stop me. Emma followed me into the hallway, calling my name. "Daniel, wait." I turned. "You laughed when Jake said I was a background character." She flinched. "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said. "And I meant what I said tonight." She didn't follow me after that. I got in my car, drove back to the hotel, turned off my phone, ordered room service, and watched the city lights flicker through the window as I ate. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of texts. Some supportive, some apologetic, some angry. My dad sent one long message about how I'd humiliated them in front of everyone and that I should have handled it like an adult. I didn't respond, because I had finally handled it exactly like an adult. By telling the truth, by setting boundaries, and by refusing to let people who abandoned me suddenly claim credit for what I built. That was 6 months ago. I haven't seen or spoken to my family since. But the project is thriving. My name's been added to the shortlist for a National Innovation Award. We're on track to publish in one of the top medical journals next quarter. And in a few days, I'll be moving into a new apartment overlooking the water, something I used to think only people with real families did. Now, I know better. Sometimes, you don't find your family. You build one. And you start by walking away from the people who never clapped when you were small, so they don't get a front row seat when you finally grow tall. My name's Austin. I'm 27 now, but this story starts way back when I was a kid. If you grew up in a family where you were constantly compared to your siblings and cousins, you probably know the kind of pressure I'm talking about. Every holiday in my family was less about celebrating and more about showcasing who was doing better. Report cards were put on the fridge like trophies, sports medals were paraded around the living room, and even summer jobs became ammunition for judgment. I was always the one who didn't measure up, or at least, that's how they painted me. At Thanksgiving, my dad loved to host these big dinners. Relatives from all over would show up, arms full of pies and casseroles, everyone squeezing into the old dining room that could barely fit us all. For some families, that would be cozy. For mine, it was an arena. The adults sat at the big table, talking about their careers, houses, and vacations, while the kids were shoved at the folding table in the corner. Even when I was well into my late teens, they'd still tell me to sit with the kids. Austin doesn't mind. He fits better over there, my mom would say with a laugh. Everyone else would chuckle, and I'd just smile tightly, trying not to let it sting. But it did. Every single time. The worst part wasn't the seating. It was the way my dad looked at me when I tried to join in the adult conversations. He had this laugh, sharp, cutting, that always made me feel small. One Thanksgiving, when I was about 20, I tried to tell my uncle about a little app one was working on with a friend. It was nothing big at the time, just a side project, but I was proud of it. My dad cut me off mid-sentence and said, "Don't bore him with your nonsense. You'll never amount to anything." The whole table laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. My cousin Matt smirked and added, "Don't worry, Austin, you'll probably just wash our cars one day." Everyone roared, and I sat there frozen, my face hot, my stomach twisting. I wanted to shout back, to remind them that I was trying, that I wasn't some failure, but the words caught in my throat. I remember pushing the food around my plate, pretending I didn't care. On the inside, though, I made myself a quiet promise. One day, I'd prove them all wrong. One day, they'd regret every single time they dismissed me. Still, proving people wrong doesn't happen overnight. I spent years grinding, working jobs that barely paid, staying up all night learning skills I couldn't afford to take classes for, living in tiny apartments where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors' arguments through the plaster. My family didn't know any of that. To them, I was still the failure, the cousin who couldn't keep up, the son who never quite hit the marks. I stopped bringing up anything about my life at holidays, because every attempt to share was met with mockery. But underneath all that quiet, something was building. Every insult was like fuel, every laugh at my expense a little spark. I started to change, though they didn't notice. Or maybe they just didn't care enough to. By the time I was in my mid-20s, things were finally starting to click. The app one worked on years ago had turned into something real, something that began to catch attention. I poured every ounce of myself into it, sacrificing sleep, weekends, and what little social life I had. Slowly, success crept in. First a steady income, then a big deal that set everything into motion. I didn't tell my family a word. Let them keep thinking I was nothing. The thing about silence is that it makes the reveal that much louder. I could already picture it sometimes when I lay awake at night. Sitting at that same Thanksgiving table, my dad laughing, my cousin smirking, and me pulling out something that would shut them all up. That vision became my motivation, pushing me through every late night and every setback. And then, last Thanksgiving, the moment came. The table was just as crowded as ever, the air thick with turkey and tension. I hadn't been to many family gatherings in the last couple of years, so when I walked in, people looked surprised. My dad gave me that same smirk, like he already had a dozen jokes lined up. He gestured toward the kids' table and said, "Go on, Austin. Your seat's waiting." My cousin Matt leaned over and whispered loudly enough for the room to hear, "Careful, guys, don't let him near the nice silverware. He might pawn it off for rent." Laughter filled the room again, the same laughter I'd been hearing my whole life. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't the same Austin they thought I was. And as I reached into my pocket, I could feel the weight of the keys pressing against my palm. I sat down at the kids' table that night, even though every part of me wanted to stand my ground. My little cousins, some of them barely teenagers, glanced at me with awkward smiles like they knew I didn't belong there, but didn't dare say anything. It was humiliating, but I'd learned to play along. I didn't want to give my dad or Matt the satisfaction of seeing me crack. So I just sat there quietly, pushing food around my plate, my jaw tight as the conversation at the main table roared on. The adults launched into their usual compare and brag routine. My Aunt Susan bragged about her daughter getting into law school. My uncle went on and on about his recent promotion. And, of course, Matt made sure everyone knew about the new car his parents had helped him buy. "It's a BMW," he said, his voice dripping with smugness. "I mean, not everyone can afford something like that. You've got to be responsible with your money, you know? Not waste it on silly ideas." His eyes flicked toward me as he said it, and the table erupted into chuckles. I stared at my plate, the turkey suddenly dry in my mouth. My dad, never one to miss a chance to pile on, jumped in. "That's the problem with Austin. He's always had his head in the clouds. No sense of direction. You give him $1, and he'll find a way to turn it into 50 cents. Everyone laughed harder, clinking their glasses like it was the toast of the century. My mom gave me this half-hearted shrug, as if to say, "What can you do?" She never defended me. Not once. Even my younger sister, Claire, who used to be the only one to show me some kindness, joined in this time. She leaned over the main table and whispered something to Matt, and the two of them burst out laughing. When I looked up, she quickly glanced away, but I caught the smirk tugging at her lips. That cut deeper than any of the other jabs. I guess she decided it was easier to laugh with them than stand with me. At one point, I overheard my uncle say, "So what's Austin up to these days? Still, what was it again? Playing on the computer?" My dad chuckled and waved him off. "Oh, who knows? Probably unemployed again. He never sticks to anything. I told him years ago, he should have just gone into construction. At least then he'd have a steady paycheck. But no, Austin always thinks he's destined for greatness." He said it with such mockery, like the very idea of me succeeding was absurd. Every time I tried to add something, to join the conversation, I was cut off. When I mentioned that I had been traveling recently, Matt snorted and said, "Traveling? What, couch surfing?" My aunt jumped in. "Don't be mean, Matthew." But she was laughing as she said it, so it didn't mean much. My dad shook his head, a grin on his face. Maybe he won the lottery. That'd be the only way Austin could afford to go anywhere. The more they spoke, the more the room closed in around me. It wasn't just the words. It was the way everyone looked at me. Like I was an extra at my own family's gathering. Like my existence was more of a punchline than anything else. That old familiar mix of anger and shame rose up in me. But beneath it, there was also something else now. Resolve. I wasn't that powerless kid anymore. They just didn't know it yet. The night dragged on with more little cuts. When dessert was brought out, my dad made sure the best slices of pie went to Matt and Claire. When I reached for a piece, he said, "Careful, Austin, leave some for the people who actually did something worth celebrating this year." My cousin Katie, who was only 15, looked at me with wide eyes, like even she thought that was too harsh. But nobody else said a word. They all just laughed again. Then, just before the meal was over, my dad clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "Let's all raise a toast to the ones who make this family proud, our achievers." He went around the table, naming Matt for his new job, Claire for her internship, my cousin Sarah for law school. And when he got to me, he smirked. And of course, to Austin, for being here. At least he made it this time. The table erupted in laughter so loud it rang in my ears. I sat there with the keys in my pocket, my fingers brushing against the metal. My heart pounded as I stared at my dad, his face red with laughter, Matt grinning smugly beside him. They thought they knew me. They thought they'd written my story years ago and that nothing I did could ever change it. They had no idea what was coming. As the laughter finally died down, I pushed my chair back, intending to slip away quietly. My chest felt tight, and I thought if I stayed any longer, I'd explode. But just as I stood, my dad called across the table, "Where are you going, Austin? We're not done celebrating yet." His tone carried that familiar edge, like he was setting me up for another round of jokes. I hesitated, caught in the spotlight of everyone's eyes. My cousin Matt smirked, swirling his wine like he was the star of some show. "Maybe he's heading out to his shift," Matt said casually. "You know, valet parking at the mall." The table burst out laughing again. It was cruel, but I'd heard worse. I could have let that one go. What happened next, though, that was different. My dad leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin with mock thoughtfulness. "Actually, maybe we should help him out," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Matt, why don't you bring the keys to your BMW? Austin can get some practice. Maybe he can learn how to handle a real car, instead of whatever beat-up junker he drives." The words hung in the air like poison. I froze, staring at him, trying to process what he had just said. He wasn't joking about me this time. He was treating me like some kind of servant, like I really was beneath everyone else. Matt, of course, jumped at the chance. He pulled his keys from his pocket and dangled them in front of me with a grin. Come on, Austin, let's see if you're good for anything. I'll even give you a tip. A few people chuckled nervously, like even they weren't sure this was still just a joke. My Aunt Susan muttered something under her breath, but she didn't stop it. My mom avoided my eyes, stirring her coffee like she hadn't heard a thing. My sister Claire whispered to the cousin beside her and then covered her mouth to hide her smile. I stood there frozen, my fists tightening at my sides. All those years of being talked down to, dismissed, and ridiculed, it had always been words. Words that hurt, but words I could swallow. But this was different. This was my own father publicly reducing me to a servant in front of the entire family. My jaw locked, and for a moment, I thought about grabbing those keys and throwing them straight back in Matt's face. Instead, I reached into my pocket and let my fingers close around my own set of keys. They were heavier, the metal cool against my palm. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear the chatter around the table. I wasn't ready to reveal anything yet. Not here, not like this. But something inside me shifted in that moment. The promise I'd made to myself years ago, that one day I'd prove them wrong, turned into something sharper, something darker. I slipped the keys back into my pocket, forcing a tight smile. No thanks, I muttered, my voice low but steady. I'll pass. Matt shrugged, clearly disappointed he couldn't humiliate me further. My dad laughed, shaking his head. Suit yourself. Guess some things never change. He raised his glass and took a long sip, like the matter was settled. But he didn't realize that was the moment everything changed. Not for him, for me. I sat back down, my food untouched, the conversation swirling around me like static. On the outside, I stayed silent, even calm. But inside, a line had been crossed. My father had made it clear that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, he'd never see me as anything more than the family failure. And if that was the role he wanted me to play tonight, fine. I could bide my time. Because when the truth came out, when they finally saw what I'd built, what I'd become, I wasn't just going to prove them wrong. I was going to make them eat every single word. That night, after the plates had been cleared and the laughter still echoed faintly in the back of my mind, I drove home in silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached, but I barely noticed. My dad's words, maybe he can get some practice, maybe he'll learn to handle a real car, looped in my head like a broken record. I tried to shake it off, but the humiliation clung to me like smoke. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a long time in the dark. The streetlights flickered faintly outside, casting long shadows across the hood. I could see my reflection in the glass, my own face staring back at me, tired and hollow. For the first time in years, I felt that same crushing weight I used to feel as a teenager, like I'd never escaped the role they had written for me. When I finally went inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with something between rage and despair. All the work I had put in, all the sacrifices, all the progress I'd made, they didn't see any of it. To them, I was still the kid at the folding table, the boy who'd never amount to anything. And what hurt most wasn't just the words. It was the fact that my own family, the people who were supposed to believe in me, wanted me to stay small. It was easier for them if I was the joke, the scapegoat. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the dinner in my head, every smirk, every laugh. By morning, I felt drained, heavy, like I was dragging around their judgment on my shoulders. I went through the motions of my day, but the fire I'd been running on for years felt dim. For the first time since I'd started building my life, I wondered if maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe no matter how far I came, they'd never see me as anything but a failure. That week, I skipped calls from friends, ignored emails, and let my work pile up. The motivation that had always carried me felt fractured. My apartment, usually clean and organized, became cluttered with dishes, unopened mail, and half-empty coffee mugs. I'd sit in front of my laptop, the screen glowing, but my hands wouldn't move. All I could hear was my father's laugh. But even in that fog, a thought began to form, faint at first, but steady. If they would never accept me, then maybe acceptance wasn't what I should chase. Maybe proving myself to them wasn't the point. The real revenge wouldn't come from seeking their approval. It would come from living in a way that made their opinions irrelevant. I started small. I forced myself to clean the apartment one night, just to take back some control. I answered a few of the most urgent emails. I reminded myself of the deals still waiting to be finalized, the opportunities lined up. The work I had built was real, regardless of what my dad thought. And if I kept pushing, there would come a day when they couldn't laugh it away anymore. So I went back to the grind, but with a different kind of fuel. Before, I had worked to prove them wrong. Now, I worked knowing they'd never admit I was right. And oddly, that realization gave me a sharper kind of focus. If they wanted to cast me as the family disappointment, I'd let them. Because when the curtain finally lifted, when the truth finally spilled out, it wouldn't just sting them. It would shatter the little world they'd built, where I was the punchline. And quietly, in the back of my mind, I began to plan. Not just for success, but for the reveal. The moment they'd realize how wrong they had been. The moment the keys in my pocket would mean more than just metal and plastic. They'd become the trigger for a silence that no one in my family would forget. The weeks that followed were a blur of work, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running on anger alone. I was running on clarity. I'd hit my lowest point at that Thanksgiving table, but hitting bottom had a strange effect. It stripped away the last traces of doubt. My family would never see me as anything more than a joke. Fine. That gave me permission to stop wasting energy, proving myself to them, and instead double down on building the life I wanted. I poured myself into my work like never before. The project I had been slowly nurturing, the one my dad had dismissed as playing on the computer, was finally taking off. We signed a big deal with a company that wanted to license our software, and suddenly, my bank account had more zeros than I'd ever imagined. For the first time, I didn't have to count every dollar at the grocery store. I didn't have to calculate whether I could afford the bus or if I should walk. I bought myself a decent car, not flashy, not yet, just something reliable. But it was mine, bought outright, not loaned, not handed down. As the months rolled on, the successes stacked higher. A second deal, then a third. My partner and I opened an office. Nothing glamorous, just a space with chipped paint and buzzing lights. But walking into it felt like stepping into my future. I started hiring people. Real employees who looked to me for direction. People who believed in what we were building. Every morning, when I unlocked the office door, I felt a surge of pride that drowned out the echo of my dad's laugh. Of course, the money grew too. I upgraded from my cramped apartment to a condo with a view of the city. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand, art for the walls, even a proper coffee machine. It wasn't about showing off. It was about finally living without that constant gnawing fear of falling behind. And then, almost without realizing it, I crossed the line from comfortable to successful. My app wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. We expanded nationally, then got offers from overseas. Articles were written, interviews requested. I wasn't just building something, I had built it. But through it all, I kept my family in the dark. I ignored their calls when they did come, and when my mom sent the occasional text, "How are you, Austin?" I'd reply with something vague, "Doing fine, just busy." I didn't tell them about the deals, the office, the condo. I wanted them to believe I was still the same Austin, barely scraping by. The longer they underestimated me, the sweeter the reveal would be. And then came the house. It wasn't planned, not at first. I had been browsing listings half-heartedly when I saw it. A sprawling property not far from my parents' neighborhood, with a gated driveway and wide windows that glowed like something out of a magazine. The price tag made my stomach flip, but when I ran the numbers, I realized I could afford it. Not just stretch for it, afford it. Walking through that house for the first time was surreal. Hardwood floors that creaked just slightly underfoot, a fireplace in the living room, a kitchen big enough to actually cook in. The backyard had room for a garden, maybe even a pool one day. I stood in the empty living room, sunlight pouring in through the tall windows, and I knew this was the place. This was where I'd start the next chapter. This was where I'd rewrite the story they had forced on me. Closing on that house was one of the proudest days of my life. I took the keys in my hand, heavy and cold, and thought back to the way Matt had dangled his BMW keys at Thanksgiving, like that was the pinnacle of success. My father's laugh, my cousin's smirk, it all felt so small now compared to what I held in my palm. I moved in quietly, without fanfare. No big announcements, no social media posts. Just me, filling the rooms with furniture, art, and life. I'd walk through the halls at night, hearing my own footsteps echo, and smile to myself. This was mine. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they told me I'd never amount to anything. This house was proof they were wrong. And yet, I still hadn't shown them. Not yet. I wanted the moment to be perfect. I wanted them to be sitting at that table again, smug in their certainty that I was a failure. And then, when the laughter was loudest, I'd pull out my keys, not to a car, but to something so much bigger. The silence that followed would be worth every second of waiting. The house was more than a place to live. It became my anchor, the quiet reminder that I had climbed out of the hole they had dug for me. But what really turned the tide wasn't just the property itself. It was the connections I started making once I was living there. The neighborhood was filled with people who had made it. Entrepreneurs, executives, even a retired athlete whose name you'd recognize instantly. At first, I felt like an imposter walking among them. But then something shifted. They didn't see me as the failure. They saw me as someone who belonged. Neighbors would wave as I jogged past, invite me to backyard gatherings, ask me about my business. For the first time in my life, people with real power and success treated me as an equal. One evening, my next-door neighbor, a man named Charles who had made his fortune in real estate, invited me over for drinks. As we sat on his patio overlooking a pool lit up like glass, he leaned in and said, "Austin, you've got something going. I can tell. Don't waste time explaining yourself to people who don't matter. Focus on those who recognize your value." His words stuck with me, echoing long after I walked home under the starlight. The truth was, I had been waiting for my family's approval all my life. But Charles was right. They didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that people outside my small family circle saw me clearly. And the more I worked, the more those circles expanded. I was invited to networking events, conferences, dinners. At one gala, I found myself shaking hands with someone whose company I'd admired for years. Another time, a venture capitalist sought me out, not the other way around, curious about the potential of my growing brand. Behind closed doors, deals started to look very different. We weren't just signing small contracts anymore. We were negotiating partnerships that could change the landscape of our industry. Money wasn't just comfortable anymore. It was powerful. I could afford things my family couldn't even dream of. But I didn't flaunt it. Not yet. Every investment, every step forward, was another card in the hand I was quietly building for the day I'd lay them all on the table. Then came the call that would set everything into motion. It was from my mom. She sounded almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure she should be calling. "Austin," she said softly, "Thanksgiving's coming up again. Your father, he wants you to be there." I nearly laughed out loud. Wants me there? After years of mockery, after the humiliation of the last gathering, now suddenly I was being invited again. But I kept my voice neutral. "I'll think about it," I said. The truth? I already knew I was going. Not because I wanted to be part of their table, but because this year I was ready. I had the house. I had the company. I had the financial power to stand taller than any of them. And in my pocket, I had the keys, solid, undeniable proof that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. The setup was falling into place perfectly. I even learned that my cousin Matt was planning to announce his engagement at Thanksgiving this year. The family would be gathered in full, buzzing with excitement, the spotlight ready to shine on him, which made it the perfect stage for what I had in mind. I didn't plan to humiliate anyone outright. That wasn't my style. But I knew the right moment would come. A casual comment, a jab at my expense, some smug dismissal, and that's when I'd make my move. That's when the laughter would stop, when the silence would fall, when the balance of power in my family would shift forever. Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray that year, the kind of day where the wind cuts through your coat no matter how tightly you button it. I remember pulling into my parents' driveway, the familiar old house looming with its chipped paint and sagging shutters, and feeling like I was stepping back in time. The smell of turkey hit me before I even knocked. Voices spilled out from inside. Laughter, clinking glasses, the same script they'd been reading from my whole life. When I walked in, heads turned. Some surprised, some smirking. My dad leaned back in his chair with a look that said, well, look who actually showed up. My cousin Matt clapped me on the shoulder with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't think you'd make it this year," he said. "Still driving that old clunker?" I smiled faintly, choosing silence. I had promised myself I wouldn't give anything away too soon. This wasn't about snapping back with a sharp line. It was about timing. The night unfolded the way it always did. The big table was full of adults, parents, aunts, uncles, the cousins they deemed worthy, while the kids' table was pushed off to the side. When I made a move toward the main table, my dad stopped me with a chuckle. "You know the rules, Austin. Kids' table." The room chuckled with him, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat down at that folding table, just like I had 100 times before, but this time my hand brushed against the keys in my pocket. Heavy, cold, a secret waiting to be unleashed. As dinner went on, the usual bragging commenced. Matt's new promotion, my sister's internship, my cousin Sarah's law school accomplishments. Every success paraded like medals in front of me. And then, predictably, the conversation circled back to me. "So, Austin," my uncle said with forced cheer, "what's new with you?" Before I could answer, my dad chimed in. "Don't pressure him. It's not like he has much to report." The laughter that followed was sharp, cutting. My mom didn't even meet my eyes. I forced a smile, sipping my water. I waited. The moment came when Matt cleared his throat and stood, holding his fiancée's hand. "Big news," he said, puffing out his chest. "We're engaged." The room erupted. Cheers, applause, clapping. My dad raised his glass. "To Matt, always making us proud." As the excitement simmered down, my cousin shot me a look across the room, smug and victorious. That was when I knew it was time. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. All eyes turned to me, expecting another awkward attempt to join in, another chance for a laugh at my expense. My heart pounded, but my voice was calm when I said, "Actually, I've got something too." The room went still. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys. They glinted under the chandelier light, a faint metallic chime as they swung in my hand. "I closed on a place recently, not far from here." I let the words hang in the air. Matt snorted. "What, a studio apartment?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No, a house. 5 bedrooms. Gated driveway. Just a couple streets away." The silence that followed was absolute. Forks froze halfway to mouths. My dad's smirk faltered, his glass of wine paused midair. My mom's lips parted slightly, like she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The keys in my hand said enough. The room, once so loud, so full of laughter at my expense, was suddenly quiet. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I felt the balance shift. For a few seconds, no one moved. The keys dangled in my hand, catching the light, and the silence in that dining room was louder than any of their laughter had ever been. My cousin Matt's smirk collapsed first. He let out a weak laugh, the kind people make when they're trying to convince themselves they're not embarrassed. "Yeah, sure. A house. Right." But his voice cracked on the last word, and I didn't have to say anything. His doubt betrayed him. My Aunt Susan leaned forward, squinting. "You bought a house? Really?" I nodded once. "Calm. Controlled. Closed last month." My dad finally set his glass down, slower than usual, like his hands had suddenly grown heavy. His face flushed, not with pride, but with something closer to irritation. That's not possible," he muttered. "You don't make that kind of money. Not you." It was my mother's turn to speak, her voice thin and trembling. "Austin, you're serious? You really bought?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, swiped to a picture, and slid it onto the table in front of them. A high-resolution shot of the front of my new house, sunlight gleaming off its tall windows, the gated driveway unmistakable. Gasps rippled across the table. Matt's fiancée leaned closer to get a better look, whispering something sharp into his ear. His jaw clenched, the proud glow from his engagement toast fading as quickly as it had arrived. My sister looked down at her plate, her face pale. The silence stretched until my dad broke it. His laugh was forced now, brittle. "Well, that's something. But don't think a house makes you better than the rest of us. You've always been reckless, Austin. You'll lose it. You'll ruin it, just like everything else." I looked at him steadily, letting the weight of the years between us settle in the air. Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped listening to you long enough to succeed. The words hit harder than I intended. His face darkened, his hand tightening on his glass. No one laughed this time. Not a single chuckle. Even the younger cousins, sitting wide-eyed at the kids' table, looked between us like they were watching something historic. For once, the spotlight wasn't on Matt or Claire or anyone else. It was on me. And it wasn't because I'd been set up to be humiliated. It was because I had taken control of the narrative they'd written for me since childhood and ripped it apart in front of them. Dinner limped on after that, but the energy was gone. Conversations were muted, laughter strained. My father barely spoke another word. Matt spent most of the evening sulking, his fiancée refusing to look at him. My mom tried to act normal, offering me more pie with a shaky smile, but her hands shook as she placed the plate in front of me. When it was time to leave, I stood, sliding the keys back into my pocket. The sound was sharp in the silence. I walked to the door without waiting for anyone to say goodbye. My dad shifted as if he might call out, but no words came. As I stepped into the cold night air, I glanced back once. The family that had mocked me, belittled me, laughed at me. They were frozen in their chairs, staring after me in silence. For the first time, they were the ones who didn't know where they stood. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred to life, steady and strong. As I pulled out of the driveway, I let myself smile. Not a smug grin, not a victorious laugh. Just a quiet, satisfied smile. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their applause. All I needed was the silence I had earned, the silence that said they would never look at me the same way again. And as the house disappeared in my rearview mirror, I knew one thing for certain. Thanksgiving would never be the same again.